Welcome, everyone. This is a meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Today is Monday, May 3rd, 2021. Is there a motion to call the meeting to order?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the
Flag
flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gentlemen, we're gonna, I'll take this meeting out of order and go right to appointments number 2. We have the town moderator, Mr. Roger Cabral, is in the audience. In respect to him and his time, it's just a quick discussion on the reduction in the quorum change. Mr. Moderator, you have anything to say to the board?
I think the only thing when the quorum changes, it's supposed to be a joint discussion between the Board of Selectmen and the moderator, so Ms. Hebert invited me to participate in that discussion. And I think it's listed on the agenda as a hearing, so I don't know what's involved in that, but I'm here to hear and contribute. I can share my opinions on what we should do if you know, when that's appropriate, but I think it's supposed to be a joint discussion between all of us.
Okay.
Mr. Gasper, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Gentlemen, as you know, due to COVID-19, in the past, we've done a quorum reduction to ensure ourselves we would have people enough people there to approve the budget and things of the like. In the past, we've done, I think, down to 10, and I believe that in the past, we've had plenty more than that, but to be on the safe side, we've always called it safe with 10. And those guidelines still fall, is that correct, Ms. Hebert, for the
That's
quorum
correct.
change? We could reduce it down to 10 if we'd like.
You can, yes.
And we surely encourage as many people as possible to show up at town meeting. But with that said, gentlemen, I'll open it up for discussion, if any.
Not much you can do about it,
Right?
yeah.
Mr. Moderator,
Yep.
if you want to go to the podium so that, I think the camera might be able to get you there.
I'll drop the mask as well. We've dropped the quorum in the past, I think for at least the last 2 meetings. And I remember at the annual meeting last year, the discussion was, we've got to keep off the agenda anything of any significance, anything of any importance, anything that wasn't essential to the operation of the town. That anything that might be controversial, anything that we really want to get people there to discuss, we should keep off the agenda because, you know, if we're going to limit quorum to 10. What I see in this current warrant's a lot of really big stuff. I mean, you've got the complete town budget here. You've got a lot of proposed bylaw changes which require a 2/3 vote. When I was discussing this with Ms. Hebert, you know, I asked what the count was at the fall town meeting, which was I don't think there was a lot there that was controversial or consequential, and we had 60 people there at that time. I would think that given where we are in the cycle of COVID, and given where, you know, what's on this warrant, it really feels to me like we should encourage the full warrant according to the bylaws, which is 75 people. And, you know, understanding where we are, but given the stuff on the agenda, I think if we wanted a 10 count, then there are things that we probably shouldn't be bringing to town meeting here, would be my opinion. And I also look at, you know, the town budget of, I'm gonna say $34 million, and it just doesn't feel right that 10 people should get to decide that, so.
Can I just have a point of clarification? When we're setting the quorum at 10, we're not saying only 10 people can show up.
No, correct.
Right?
No.
We just have a floor that allows the meeting to move on, but I think we can still, you can change the quorum, but we should be working overtime with outreach in informing people that they've got to show up, right? I mean, I don't know that the average person even understands whether or not, so you're saying if by having 10, if 20 people shows up, the show goes on, decisions are made versus.
But if 10 people show up, 10 people are gonna decide.
Right.
Changes in the bylaws, changes in you're setting that standard, and you're saying, okay, 10 people are here,
Right.
we can conduct all of this business, so
I don't know.
that would be my concern. And when the warrant, when we knew we were gonna reduce it to 10 last time, all kinds of stuff got thrown out, and we said, this isn't essential to bring to town meeting at this point, because we know we may only have 10 people there, so. And we had 60 in the fall, perhaps.
Yes.
And there wasn't a lot on that agenda that was,
Yeah, stripped down.
it was
Stripped down
strict,
to the
yeah.
basics.
And there wasn't a
Yeah.
lot there that would have caused people to turn out, and yet 60 people were there.
Well, I think, this is probably somewhat off topic, but, the pandemic has exposed a lot of business models that may not be, real time, and, maybe this is an opportunity, not this meeting, but bigger picture to think of either an elected town meeting or something, right? Because, it just seems that COVID aside, attendance, we've heard it before, well, geez, only 80 people decide the budget, or geez, only 90 people decide, unless you've got, a 200-300 meeting person town meeting, I think you could always be in that argument range where there's never enough people there, I personally, I stand behind, I take the responsibility of being part of the budget and voting for the budget, seriously, and I ask the residents to hold me accountable based on our decisions, and, so I get I'm all for the participation. I think it's the greatest form of the republic, but by the same token, we should examine what's realistic and not, just given society, this day and age, how people receive information, just a bigger picture of.
And you've got a finance committee that's independently reviewed all of the budget, so
Right,
there's
right,
that,
yeah.
that's a check on it as well, and independently reviewed every article, so there's that as well.
Just-
I mean, I
just
can
a-
argue both sides, Mr.
Yeah,
Warner.
it's just
I hear what you're saying.
just a thought,
Yep,
about
I hear what you're saying.
examining how we've done business, so.
Thoughts, comments, Mr. Roche?
Well, to arbitrarily pick a number out to say, okay, I concur with Roger on this, or Mr. Moderator, that previous, when we really brought down the quorum number, was because we had stripped down versions of the warrant. The basic housekeeping that goes on every year, maybe a couple sprinkled in, so now we have bylaw review changes, or bylaw changes coming up. I mean, as a compromise here, what we're looking at, 50 people, 60 people, less than the quorum, but not enough to make it, mean something that people should show up. So, but arbitrarily pick a number, I mean, 50, 55.
I'm all for 75, it doesn't matter to me either way, I'm just saying, like, the overall,
I think that things have changed a little bit over the last 6 months, and 75 might not be a bad number. I think people will show up.
That's what the charter calls for anyway, is 75.
That's what the bylaw says, bylaw charter says
Yeah.
75, says we should be at 75. We're certainly
It-
not
it
in normal
does.
times yet.
And I would advocate, because of some of the zoning bylaw changes, Mr. Moderator, that if we ended up in that auditorium and we only had 20 people, 25 people, I think that conversation would take place for us to table any
To
zoning
table
changes.
articles. Yep.
And strike that off because of the 2/3 vote requirement and everything else,
That's an
unfortunately.
option, that's a good option as well.
It would be what it is, but I'm always discouraged, sometimes sitting on that stage looking down at the audience, even with the 75, which is the town bylaws and charter, right? And I've always said it on camera, I wish we had 200, 300, 400 people inside that making decisions on behalf of the community, and not a smaller group, so, doesn't matter. I think, 50 isn't a bad number to go with, and if we have anything below that, town meeting won't be held, basically, we'd have to postpone it. With that said, June 30th is fast approaching, and we would need a budget, so we would have to figure that out as well. Because after June 30th, we don't have an operating budget, we don't have approval for expenditures and things of the like, and we all know Mass General Law states that you cannot expend without town meeting approval, so that would be very difficult. So I'm fine with 50, and anything below that, we'd be in trouble anyway, so, I think 50 is a reasonable number. It's basically a third off the 75, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sound good?
Yeah,
I think we'll be stronger than 50.
I hope so.
Do we need a motion for this?
Yeah,
So-
we need a motion to set the quorum at 50.
So, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to set the quorum for this year's town meeting at 50 residents.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Very good.
Thank you. See you next week.
All right, thank you.
The first order back to meeting mail is a letter regarding issues on South Main Street and other areas. And it's a letter respectfully from the neighborhood. Can you please do something about the two dumps on Laura Keene Ave? The first is on Main Street in Laura Keene, cars, boats, bulldozers, rolls of wire, barrels, tractors, boulders, etc. Have the owners put up a fence all around that mess or move it all that trash somewhere else. The second is 61 Laura Keene Ave, some problem, abandoned cars, boats, trailers, campers, pipes, piles of bricks, old lawnmowers, truck bodies, rock piles, gas stoves, scrap metal. Have the owners, I'm sorry, I apologize, either clean that mess or put an 8-foot fence around the property. No need to have this unsightly mess in our neighborhood. It's bad enough we have to deal with, I won't say it. So respectfully, the neighborhood. And then Mr. Merritt has obviously sent 2 letters dating December 18, 2019 and February 7, 2019 to the owner of the property. It says, as a third notice, an additional heat comes in from the surrounding neighborhood. I must strongly encourage you to move as quickly as possible to implement the plan drawn by Ken Motter and the field engineering as approved by the town before we are forced to take additional steps to bring in the yard into conformity. Immediate attention to this is required to prevent enforcement. And basically, the second letter says the same, gentlemen. So letters have been sent out to the property owners, and hopefully it'll get cleaned up.
Is there any civil, like, what's the teeth behind it? What's the teeth behind this, Julie, though? Like, we send all the letters we want, but if there's no,
I think it's minimal. I think the bylaws might say something about after the first offense. I think it's $100. I think it used to be $50, and then after that, it's $100 for every offense thereafter, if it's
Yeah.
not abated.
I'm not quite sure on that, but I know that there was some litigation a little bit from us with the owner of the property. And they were supposed to put up a big fence around it, but it was gonna cost them a lot of money.
The other piece of that is part of our warrant for town meeting,
Right.
that bylaw that's in there.
Yes.
Right.
That gives it the teeth.
okay. Guess we'll have to wait till, let the red, I don't know if this came in on a, somebody dropped it off. if there was
Yeah,
a-
they left it in the lockbox, so we
Okay.
can't really go
Right,
back to them, we don't know who
response.
left it here, so.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they may be watching the meeting, but I will say, I believe our bylaws don't allow a fence higher than 6 feet. So,
So once we go to town meeting, right?
it is what it is, but I'm not even sure that that's an allowed use on the property on South Main Street, so it is what it is. All right, first appointment, we have a hearing on a Class 3 license renewal request for the property located at 734 Main Street, Repwell Corp. As you know, gentlemen, Mr. Merritt has held the licenses in the previous year, in late November, December. We always approve license renewals in December. I think it was December 15th of 2020, and he held the licenses. He had some letters of concerns that were written to the board around this. Class 3, we did issue a Class 2 for the used car license for this property, 734 Main Street, better known as Repwell, as their principal business. Mr. Merritt has several letters out from the building department. It says existing use, I'll just read some of them. As listed in the files was a construction yard and a cement plant owned by Campanella Corporation. That use was extended through the repair of their commercial vehicles for welding operations. In 1985, Mr. Sylvia applied for a variance in accordance with the provisions of Article 5.2. Variance was granted and runs with the land as stipulated, supposedly recorded deed restriction to allow an area 300 feet by 300 feet located 600 feet off Main Street, limit 50 vehicles. That Class 2 that's being referenced here that the variance was for. We did issue at the bottom of that, it says any other use of the property except for residential purposes would be strictly forbidden, as all prior uses have long since been abandoned. And on another letter that he writes, it basically goes on to call out Vincent Farm. The property was sold to Campanella and Cardi Corporation in the mid-1950s, which later just became Campanella, as listed in the files. They operated a construction yard and cement plant. As an accessory use, this was extended through the repair of commercial vehicles for the welding of the same. All repair work was to be performed within the steel building, which still exists. In 1975, Mr. Sylvia purchased the property as Repwell Corp. In 1985, applied for the variance in accordance with the provisions of then Article 5.2 of protective bylaws. It goes back to saying the same thing. The variance was granted and runs with the land as stipulated by what should be recorded deed restriction. Problem is, the variance was apparently never recorded, and the bylaws now specifically prohibit use variances. And it goes on to say our bylaws do allow by special permit automotive service station, which by definition off the web goes on to describe an automotive service station. It does say in that same letter, junkyards are not allowed. Any other use of the property except for residential purposes would be strictly forbidding, as all prior uses have long since been abandoned. This parcel contains almost 38 acres and is the starting place of Tinkham Brook. It is located in the middle of a residential A district with a number of very expensive dwellings surrounding it. Issued licenses should bear on this. And there's another letter basically saying the same thing, gentlemen, about the repair facility needing a separator tank, I believe, for liquids and things of the like, and septic for commercial property. But when we had Mark Cinerizio was here, I'll call him Mark A. Cinerizio, is that correct? Not the father. We had him in to do the Class 2. I asked Mr. Mara if everything was okay in accordance for the Class 2 issuance. He nodded his head saying yes. So that being off the table, we have discussion tonight about a Class 3 license, which is a junk license. And after Mr. Merritt's letters go on and on and on about being abandoned, and it's, I don't want to quote him wrong, any other use of the property except for residential purposes would be strictly forbidding, as all the prior uses have long since been abandoned. Mr. Merritt's letter, Mr. Merritt's words, and duplicate letters stating of the same. So we sent out a notice. Dear Mark A. Cinerizio, you are hereby notified that on Monday, May 3rd, 2021, 4 p.m., at the Selectmen's meeting room, the Town Hall, the Acushnet Board of Selectmen, acting as the town's licensing authority, the board will deliberate on your recent request for a Class 3 license renewal pursuant to General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 59. Additionally, it has been brought to the attention of the board that the property is located at 734, is not zoned for use as a junk or salvage yard, and the property is currently licensed as a Class 2 licensed facility. As you may know, the board may deny a request for the Class 3 license if it is requested property is not suitable for this use, and which includes not being an allowed use under current zoning. Additionally, pursuant to General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 58, one of the criteria for the Class 3 license is that the Class 3 business be your principal business. As you already have a Class 2 licensed business at the subject property, you may not qualify for a second Class 3 business. The board will take evidence and hear testimony regarding the above deficiencies with your Class 3 application at the above scheduled hearing. The hearing may result in the non-renewal of your Class 3 license. So, I know that we had some pictures attached, gentlemen, with the letters from Mr. Merritt. I don't know if those were taken from Mr. Merritt or they were taken from a resident, and you should have that in your package. And what I did do, I'm sorry, Lisa, you talking to me? So what I did do is I was a little bit concerned on this, and I pulled some files and looked at some pictures. And so what I just did was, because we talked about abandon of the use and things of the like, what I did do is I pulled pictures from 2013-14 off the natural heritage of endangered species and wildlife for 2013-14, and the pictures look pretty clear, as Mr. Merritt's saying. No evidence of a junkyard being demonstrated there. And then 2019, the property is that much cleaner. You can see this. You wanna see that? And then the 2013-14 is here. And then I've demonstrated what a junkyard would actually look like here. To confirm what Mr. Merritt was talking about, in the bylaws, we do have an abandonment clause, gentlemen. I think that's where Mr. Merritt went to and alluded to, and how he came about this. And inside the bylaws, under abandonment, 5.4 says a non-conforming use, including a non-accessory sign, if discontinued for a period of 2 or more years or abandoned, shall not be reestablished, and any future use of the structure or premises shall conform to this chapter. And multiple uses on page 36, number 2, multiple uses only if they comply to this chapter, multiple uses are allowed. So I would gather that Mr. Merritt sent these letters out at that point. What has concerned me after reviewing this, quite simply, is that it took this long for Mr. Merritt, our building inspector, to bring this to the Board of Selectmen's attention. It hasn't been, by viewing the pictures and speaking to plenty of people, and it's kind of strange to me on why and how come it took this long for this to be brought to the Board of Selectmen's attention. The Board of Selectmen, in reviewing the files with the town administrator, I believe Ms. Leonard was there, Mr. Merritt, we went into the cellar, and it goes back, issuing a license, a junk license, some almost 30 years to this property. But with that said, I spoke with counsel. Jeff, can you hear this?
I can hear you, yes.
I spoke with counsel, and there is a thing that's out there that says if the Board of Selectmen have the right to not reissue or revoke, whatever it may be, because the board has been issuing, or the license authority has been issuing a license in error. And we, the Board of Selectmen, regardless of what kind of license we are issuing on a renewal, whether it be a common vic license, which would fall under the purview of the Board of Health, or in this particular case, Class 2, Class 3, we rely on either the Board of Health agent and or the building commissioner under their purview to go out every year and check for compliance with these licenses. So he did it and sent these letters out. I think the first one to the previous owner of Repwell was 2018, and that goes back, and then subsequent letters thereafter. And then I know that Mr. Sylvia had then sold the property to now Mr. Cinerizio. So there we have it in a nutshell. Mr. Merritt sent numerous letters about the abandonment of the property in the Class 3 junk license. I spoke when it was a Class 2 used car license, that it would be very difficult, based even on pictures that I've noted here, it would be very difficult to say that there wasn't some vehicle for sale over that period of time, and we did issue that used car license again to Repwell. I think the concerning letters from Mr. Merritt, our building commissioner, with the abandonment clause clearly stating his feelings on the licenses, it leaves us here today to decide. And Mr. Blake, we had a conversation, and there's some, you wanna talk to the board, please, about the statute of the law where it comes to principal businesses?
Sure, under chapter 140, section 58, a class 2 or a class 3, or even a class 1 for that matter, says that it has to be your principal place of business.
Jeff, can you try to turn that up?
What was I saying?
I can hear you, we can hear you, I don't know if it's,
Is that better?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
Well, I'm sitting right on it, but can you guys
go
hear
ahead,
it
talk,
better?
Jeff.
Okay, under a class 2 license, under chapter 140, section 58, a person whose principal business is the buying or selling of secondhand, et cetera. And with respect to the class 3 license, it has the same terminology, meaning a person whose principal business. There is a question with respect to this particular application. Since there is already a class 2 license at that facility or at that property, that a second one wouldn't be the principal business. There would be 2 principal businesses. And it's my reading and readings of others that I have discussed this with at my firm, that that is not necessarily, that's probably not allowed. I say probably because this issue has never been litigated, but principal business, the plain language of principal means, the primary business. So it would be difficult to have 2 primary businesses. That together with it, and I think I've discussed this with you at different times, under the statute, the analysis that the board makes is essentially boiled down. A suitable person and suitable venue, place for the license. And in my opinion, a suitable place would be one that is zoned for that particular use. A property that is not zoned for that use, in my opinion, is not a suitable place for issuing a class 3, class 2, class whatever license. If it's not allowed, then it's not a suitable place.
Okay. And then it just says, would class 2 or class 3, principal place of business, sufficient premises for used car dealership. The statute further requires the license specify all of the premise to be occupied for carrying out the used car business. General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 59. In this regard, the license authority must be sure that the used car business will be the applicant's principal business and that the premise he has available are suitable for that purpose. General Law, Chapter 140, subsection 59. So, with that being said, gentlemen, and you guys have seen the photos, and I know that in the variance that was issued in 1985 to Repwell, Mr. Sylvia, it goes on to say, the question was actually asked by, I believe it was Mr. Murphy. I have that somewhere. And the question, Lisa, did you put a copy in here?
which
Yep,
one?
one that you can't read.
Well, that's what we
So
got.
basically, the question was simply asked when the Class 2 variance was being done by the Zoning Board of Appeals. The question was asked, the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Mr. Murphy, basically asked the question, will there be junk parts? And Mr. Sylvia answered no. So at that point in time, there was no junkyard there. I don't know if Mr. Cinerizio or the attorney has anything pertinent to disclose to the board.
Hope so.
I don't know who you are.
Mr. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, for the record, I'm attorney John Williams with an office at 651 Orchard Street, New Bedford. I represent Repwell. Repwell has owned this business since 1974.
Can I hold two?
Sure.
Hey, Jeff?
I can hear.
Okay, I'm just looking down. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right, they've owned this since 1974. They did have a variance granted, and I checked, it wasn't recorded, but there was a case in 2013, Grady case, basically saying as long as they were continuing the purpose or the intent of the variance, having it not recorded is not a fatal flaw, and so I would think that is off the table. The class 2 is granted. When you say principal business, I mean, this business here, they do welding, they repair cars, they sell used cars. They have a class 3 license that's been issued for years and years, probably prior to zoning. This is a pre-existing non-conforming use that's been there prior to zoning. I heard you say there's some beautiful houses nearby. Well, we built it after this business.
Oh, I haven't even talked about the beautiful house.
Oh, yeah, you did mention it, though. You mentioned quite a bit of things, and that's curious in and of itself. But, so there's a class 3 license that's been issued every year. And I got a copy of it, signed by everyone here. Class 3 license says restrictions, no tires stored out on grounds, which they haven't. Area used for business, 300 by 300, approximately 2 acres. And it says limit of 100 vehicles. It's been issued yearly, never been an issue. I'm not sure why it's an issue now, but when you say that the use was abandoned, I have the prior owner representative here. He said he's been using it for that constantly, consistently, right through there. So all the licenses have been reviewed yearly. The town's taken their money. They've paid property taxes in here based on that. It's still owned by the same entity from 1974. It's not a change of it's not a change of ownership per se. It's a corporation. It's a change of offices in the corporation. But Repwall owns the property, and Repwall owns the business. So so I'm not sure exactly what the intent of the board is here. Like I said, it's curious. They've been doing it since 1974, and it just becomes an issue now. So if it was abandoned, maybe the statute is applicable. But you know what? When you're talking about principal place of business, I looked that up too. I haven't seen any litigation on that. I haven't seen any cases on that. I haven't seen any controlling cases on that. When you say principal business, he sells more than one thing. If you go into a grocery store, what's his principal business? Selling meat? Selling groceries? What are you gonna stop him because he stopped selling meat at one point? Principal business of this is multifactional. He has a lot of different assets to make the business work. Guys, but they're hard-working people. They've been in town since 1974, way before any of these brand-new houses have been built. It's kind of like the guy who builds a house next to the airport and complains about the planes. Well, you don't build a house next to, if you think it's a junkyard, you don't build a house next to the junkyard. You know, and if you do, don't complain. I live in Dartmouth. You know, there's Mrs. Hoole, the goat lady. She's been there for 50 years. People do a subdivision down the road, and they want her out of there. You built next to the lady. Same thing here. But more importantly, the license, there was no abandoned use of the license. And I think if we'll have the former owner here, he can probably expound on that a little bit more than I can. But I think that it's not a junk. There's no 100 cars there. No one's expecting for 100 cars to be there. But if they take a car in and they work on it, and it's not functional, they can use it to take parts off and sell it and then get the carcass out of there. That's fine. No one's looking to put 100 cars, 100 junk cars here. But it's all in a specific area, a 300 by 300 foot area that's away from the front of the road. You know, this is a big piece of property. I mean, it's acres and acres. I don't know. No one has junk cars on the street, and to take a business that's been here probably before zoning, and been using the same use, and then for whatever purposes or reasons that you're going to take away their Class 3 license and take away a piece of their business and try to take a piece of their livelihood away, that's not right. You can't do that arbitrarily.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. DeRoche.
Attorney Williams?
Yes.
I guess my biggest question right now,
Okay.
first question I have, and see if we can vet this out, is when was the Class 3 variance granted?
It's not a variance, it's a license.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
That's my point. There was I
It's-
cannot find any evidence that a variance was granted that would pertain to the business of a Class 3 license.
That license.
My point being is that in 85, April 9th, 1985, a variance was granted for a Class 2 license. And during that variance hearing, the owner was asked if there'll be any junk parts on the property, and the owner said no. So a Class 2 license was granted at that time, only a Class 2. Now, let's fast forward, 1985, 86. I can only rely on information, stories around town. I heard at the beginning of the 90s that the owner applied for a special permit for a paintball farm where you could run around and shoot each other out in the woods with paintballs. I have no idea if that was ever granted. We have no information from the ZBA or for the Board of Selectmen or from anybody, planning board, that said a special permit was granted for that. And then somewhere, the only information I have, somewhere in 2017, I got a blank junk license, a copy of a junk license that isn't signed from 2017. And that's the information I have. I have no information that a variance was granted specifically for a salvage yard, and that's a big hurdle for me. That's how do you connect this? Because now we're taking a Class 2 license and saying, well, a variance was granted, so it needs to include the Class 3, which I don't believe that's true. So, so that's my question. When, if ever, was there a variance granted for a Class 3 junk salvage license to be issued by the Board of Selectmen? That's all I really would just like to know that. Was it in the 90s, 2000s? When did this junk license appear all of a sudden?
Well, I don't think anyone's trying to include this in any variance, okay? From what I've been told, and I think there's less records than you could see and I can see. What I've been told, when the record was formed in 1974, that was what they were utilizing that as junk parts, and they've been utilizing it ever since. So it's a pre-existing non-conforming use that's been in existence for 45 years. And no one required a license back then, but they've been continually doing it, and you've been continually issuing it. So all of a sudden, for whatever reason now, it's a problem. I don't know why that, and that's something that you people might know better than me. But it's been used for 45 years as a Class 3. Whether or not they had, I don't even know if the town at that point in time issued Class 3 licenses. You know, the towns back then, prior to zoning, you could do almost anything you wanted to. Then when he started getting zoning in, then he started issuing licenses because they want to make a buck off the license or regulate it. And when they started requiring them to do that, they started paying for them. But they had been using it way before that. So it's not like no one went for a variance for this because they've been using it like that forever. You know, you don't have to get a variance if it's a pre-existing non-conforming use prior to zoning. So,
Well,
It couldn't have been, that's my problem,
what's that?
it couldn't have been a pre-existing non-conforming use prior to 1985 for the simple fact that the variance that we've received a copy of, and I got all the documentation behind that, the chairman of the ZBA specifically asked the question, when issuing the variance for a Class 2, which is a used car license, is this: will there be junk parts?
On that piece, on that 300 by 300 foot piece, but there's two 300 foot pieces.
I think that's a far stretch to ask
No, it's not a far
about a
stretch
piece of
because he
property
asked him for
versus
that
the
piece.
actual property. When you go in for a variance
Yeah.
and you're asking for a variance, if you needed a variance for a Class 2 license in 1985,
Right.
I'm sure you would need a variance for a Class 3 because it's much more intrusive and invasive to the neighborhood. So in 1985, Patrick Murphy, the chairman of the ZBA, specifically asked the question, will there be junk parts? And the answer to that question by Mr. Sylvia was no. So at that point, there wasn't a junkyard. That's what that tells me, by the chairman specifically asking that question. And it's clear in the recording of the
It is.
zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
So,
Okay, they set up a 300 by 300 foot piece for the auto sales, for the class two. They had another 300 by 300 foot piece. It's not the same piece. There's two separate pieces where these things are set out. So when he did it, is there gonna be junk cars on this class two 300 by 300 foot piece? No. It's exactly what they said. Did they ask if there's another section of the 40-acre property or close to that property? Is there gonna be something with junk cars? They didn't ask. Whether or not they asked that night of the hearing, that's what you got recorded. And that's all you got. So you're trying to take something that's not there and make it there, and that's an issue.
I'm actually not trying to take anything, but what I do have is a copy of the 1973 bylaws in my hand.
Okay.
And junkyards weren't an allowed use then either. That's how far back I went to try to figure something out. And junkyards are not an allowed use in a residential zone, and that was the only zone that was given back then.
But it must have been condoned, Mr. Gasper.
Must have been
because
what?
Must have been condoned because they never made them remove them.
Remove what?
The junkyard. Since then, they've been in existence since 1974. If that was such an issue back then, why didn't you do something back then? You got 45 years, they've been letting them do it.
I'm not so sure there's 1974 was a junkyard, and I can tell you right now, if you wanna come up and take a look at the pictures,
I can tell you.
it's not a junkyard.
May I say something?
Well, I think, why don't we have the former owner there, because he knows more about this.
Yeah,
History
I
of
think
this,
I can
which
give you
don't
guys
know.
some history. My name's Mark, I'm gonna be under here. My name's Mark Sheridan.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something?
Yeah, Jeff Blake, Town Council, wants to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the extent that it is a pre-existing non-conforming use, as my brother is trying to say right now, you know, that's something that is incumbent upon the applicant to prove, and that's likely would need to go before the zoning board of appeals to make that determination. I do know that in some of the documentation that I've reviewed by your zoning enforcement officer, he had seemed to indicate that there was no protected use for a junkyard. So he has made that determination, maybe not necessarily directly on as a result of a question. But if you recall, there were a couple of letters in the file that the zoning enforcement officer, Jim Merritt, has indicated that a junkyard is not allowed. So to the extent that they're now trying to claim that it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, that's something that the zoning board of appeals would have to move forward with. As it is, as it stands today, that's not an allowed use in the area. Additionally, to the extent that the board has been issuing permits, I understand that that is an issue here. A town is never stopped from enforcing its bylaws. It's never, and neither is a local licensing authority. To the extent that those permits may or may not have been issued by mistake, the town is not bound to forever make that mistake. Once it became aware or to the attention of the town that this was not an allowed use in the area, it is 100% proper to gain additional scrutiny to find out whether or not it is an allowed use. And the information that I have seen does not stand up to what my brother is saying there. The mere fact that you may have had a class 3 license does not, for zoning purposes, in my opinion, protect you for a pre-existing non-conforming use. You would have to be actually using the property, not simply getting a piece of paper that says I could use the property for that.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.
My name's Mark Sheridan. I was on the board of directors of Retwell as their secretary. I probably can give you guys a lot of insight to what the property's been doing since 1974. My main purpose here is to kind of educate you. Any questions you have, I probably have the answer to. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the specifics about, you know, what pieces of paper mean to what. I can just tell you what I know. What I know is that my father, I call him my father because he adopted me when I was younger. I know that he worked hard up at Redwell since 1974 after returning from Vietnam as a veteran. He put his whole life there, and I know that his primary business there was to fix cars and to sell cars. And to fix cars and to sell cars, you also need car parts. So it is part of a primary business. What they would do is they would have cars come in and they would fix them. He would buy cars from people. After he bought these cars, somebody would come in and he would say, oh, you need a radiator. I'm gonna take the radiator out of this car and I'm gonna put it in your car to save you some money instead of getting you a brand new one. And that's really what the business has done for the last 45 years. A Class 3 license, in my opinion, is not a junkyard. It is, and I don't think that's what it states on the license. I think what it is it gives the person who has it or the company who has it the ability to use used parts and to put those used parts onto other vehicles or to sell them. That's what I believe the license is. There were times where we had 50 cars on that property. I remember playing around them when I was a kid. I used to sit inside those cars and pretend I was driving through drive-throughs and getting chased by the police. And guess what? There were times where there might have been one car or two cars. You know, there's 2 buses that have been there since 1974 that I just took out of there in 2018. So Redwell isn't trying to make a junkyard out of this property. What Redwell is trying to do is trying to keep their primary business going, fixing cars and trying to save people money by using and selling used parts. That's basically it. I can tell you that since 1974, the business has never abandoned anything. We've been in business continuously since 1974. If you want to look at our records, our tax records, we paid our corporate tax records every single year. We've paid all our taxes every year. We've paid all our licenses every year. And I can tell you, whether there's a variance for used parts and cars or not, I can tell you in 1974, 1975, they were there. And they've been there ever since. And why, after 45 years, is this an issue? Does it have something to do with $1 million worth of houses parked next to us now? That's what everybody's gonna ask. And it just goes to court. I think that's what the judge is gonna wanna know. And I'm hoping that don't happen. I hope you guys can find a solution tonight.
Well, Mr. Sheridan, it still leads me right back around to where I started, is there's no evidence of any variance being granted for a type.
Is that Redwell or Mr. Sylvia's fault that this town wasn't able to manage the paperwork and manage the licenses as they should have? Is it our fault? The evidence is, since 1974, we've been fixing cars, using used parts, and selling cars continuously. I have a license in 2018 from your, what's his name, Merritt. Says it right on it, approved non-conforming use. He came down and visited me. I asked him to. And I stood in the yard with him. And I said, I want to put in storage. You can't do it. Well, why can't I do it? You need a special permit. I said, well, it's not covered under my licenses. And he sat there and he said to me, no, you have 2 licenses. One is for a dealer license. They have to be, and we walked over, they have to be 600 feet off the road. They got to be in this area. And he said, and then you have a Class 3 license, and that is over here, this 2 acres or 3 acres, whatever it is. And I said, so I cannot put storage here. He goes, you got to go to the town, get a special variance, probably put up fences. So we never did it. My point is, even he came down on the property and told me what I had and what we had. And I've never got, I was the secretary of Redwell. I've got one letter from Mr. Merritt, one, in 2018. And it had nothing to do with any of this. It had to do with the fact that we wanted to put U-Haul on the property. And we did it, thinking that it was part of the primary business and it would be covered under our operation. And I got a letter that said, Mr. Sheridan or Mr. Sylvia, sorry, you can't do this. And I sent the letter back. And I said, I'm sorry. We didn't realize we were doing anything we shouldn't, and we won't do it. We complied. It instantly. And we never did it. And if I had gotten anything from the town, we would have addressed it, just like we addressed that.
Well, don't, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sheridan, just
Mr. DeRoche.
don't stick your foot in the, well, I was gonna say your head in the noose. Because we do have, you were cited, or the business was cited for improvements that needed to be made back in 2019 from Mr. Merritt.
I got one letter in 2018 from Mr. Merritt.
Right.
And
Well, then whoever it went to at
it would have went to me.
you know.
It would have went to me.
Because,
Was this a certified letter? Because I would like to see it, because I never received it.
Mr. Sheridan, I would like to address something that you said, that you've been around for a long time.
Mhm.
So, I ran Mr. Sylvia's annual reports back to 2004, and I have copies over here.
No, I was not on the board in 2004.
So you weren't anywhere listed in 2004, and Mr. Sylvia listed briefly described the business of the corporation, Mass Inspection Station Auto Repair. 2008, Mass Inspection Station Auto Repair. Your name appears nowhere as any director.
No,
2012 doesn't appear again. And it's,
It won't pass 2018.
and it says Mass Inspection Station Auto Repair. 2015, it changed to auto repair and welding under the brief description. No mention of inspection stations. You're still not listed as a secretary. 2018 is when you appear as a secretary, and it's listed as welding and mass and vehicle inspection station. You left out auto repair.
Yeah, we also
And then
left out
2019,
selling cars too.
2019, it changes on the Secretary of State's website when you appear on it as a secretary, motor vehicle sales, salvage, repair, maintenance, Massachusetts inspection station. It's the first year Mr. Sylvia mentions motor vehicle sales and salvage on the annual report.
Yeah, that was after talking to Jim, who told us, basically that we need to have everything listed on our license, so we did. My dad,
that
he
brings-
didn't know when he was doing that he was supposed to list everything. It just says briefly list what you do.
You don't have to list everything.
Yeah, your primary business.
You don't, because I can register a corporation today as a hot air balloon business in the town of Acushnet, and the Secretary of State's gonna take my filing fee and say, you have a heyday with your hot air balloon, it doesn't even
Yeah.
exist.
No, but-
So it just
but
goes.
But usually in a corporation, you put down any other lawful purpose a corporation can do in the Commonwealth of Mass.
And that's fine,
It
but
covers you.
Mr. Sheridan's saying that he's been part of this
No,
business.
he knows. the
No. I did not say that. I said, I grew up there.
Okay.
I
but
grew up there.
the
I've
problem-
been down
there's-
there.
There's a problem with Mr. Sylvia rented Mass Auto for 18 years as an auto repair facility, and Mr. Sylvia had nothing to do with this property for 18 years.
That's not true. That's absolutely not
How
true.
is that not true?
Because so it's interesting that he's bringing this up, because it kind of shows, now we're getting to the meat of the subject. Mr. Sylvia rented partial one bay of the building to Mass Auto 2. Mr. One Bay. Repwell has always owned the property, has always operated the inspection station there, has always sold cars, and has always used used parts. All he did was rent one bay to Mass Auto Tune. That's all they did. They had no ownership, they had no anything else. All they did was rent one bay. And if you look at the charter of the business, it says right in the charter of the business that he can work with other companies as long as it's within the law. So was he breaking the law by renting that bay to another company to do auto work? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a lawyer. And I know that I've been on that property most, if not all of my life. Like I said, I used to, when I was younger, go around there and play in the cars. I always advise Bob and Lynn all the time, and when I come back into town from living in Kentucky for 20 years, I would talk to them, I would see what was going on, I helped them with the business, and then I came back permanently, and when I did that, that is when I became a board member. I wasn't trying to mislead you, sir. I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
well,
let you know that
I
I'm well aware of
I
the
know that
business
because
and its
I've been here to
operations.
get, I was in the auto repair business too, my friend.
Mhm.
And we used to send our customers over to Mass Auto / Rep Wealth for inspection stickers.
mhm.
And there was nobody else there other than the employees of Mass Auto. So for you to say that they only rent a portion of it, whose name was that sticker machine in for 18 years?
Rep Weld, check with them. Not Ron Madden, Rep Weld. It's true, I'm not lying to you, Rep Weld. Just like the property, Rep Weld, the business, Rep Weld, the licenses, Rep Weld. Everything, sir, Rep Weld, including the inspection station businesses.
Quick.
And
Sorry.
Yeah, any
Just got a question for Jeff Blake.
I'm gonna have a seat.
Jeff,
Let me know if
so,
you have any other questions.
thank you. So Jeff, the town currently, are we allowed to issue class 3 licenses or not? Just bring me up to speed on that. 'Cause I'm trying to get a clarification. Is there a separate definition of what constitute a junkyard by Mass General Law, or what, class 3? I'm trying to get a sense of those definitions and what is the
All right.
town status.
Here, I'll read you the definition of a class 3. Class 3, a person whose principal business is the buying of secondhand motor vehicles for the purposes of remodeling, taking apart, or rebuilding, and selling the same, or the buying or selling of parts of secondhand vehicles or tires, or the assembly of secondhand motor vehicle parts, may be granted a motor vehicle junk license. That's
Sorry.
why we typically shorthand refer to a class 3 as a vehicle junk license.
For selling parts and things.
Are we allowed, are we precluded from issuing that permit in the town of Acushnet? Because I keep hearing that we don't allow junkyards. So what constitutes an actual junkyard?
Sure, I mean, I think there is a slight difference between a
I don't wanna run it
junkyard
every
No,
and
no, I just wanted
this
for my own.
particular license. However, I don't see that you are prohibited from issuing a class 3 license. However, it's gotta be in a zone that allows it.
Okay. But again, just help me out with the terminology of what constitutes an actual junkyard. Is there some common definition or Mass General Law? Because what I'm hearing is, what they're suggesting sounds like that of a class 3, but I keep hearing the term junkyard. But I need to know what the legal definition of a junkyard is. Is that like materials stay?
That's one in town.
No, but I want to know what the legal definition is. Like, with the class 3, the things have to like constantly move, cycle in and out, whereas the junkyard allows stuff, material to be sedentary for a period of time. Like, what's the definition of an actual junkyard?
Alright, so under chapter, I don't have the chapter, but there is a junkyard, an establishment or place of business which is maintained, operated, or used for storing, keeping, buying, or selling junk, or for the maintenance or operation of an automobile graveyard, and the term shall include garbage dumps and sanitary bills.
That's not Rep
And
Weld.
that,
That's not what I
That's
want,
chapter
that's not what
140B.
we do.
I just need, again, I just want it for my own definition, so we're all using the same terms, right?
Yeah.
You know, excuse me, I think you can issue a class 3 license and put restrictions on it, you know?
Right, but the
Just like
issue,
you-
absolutely
because-
can do that.
right,
I
but then
mean-
the issue is, in that area, it would have to then go to the Board of Appeals or some other body other than the Board of Selectmen, right? Because it's not zoned for that property.
It's not even allowed use anywhere anymore, Mr. Wona, so they can't go to the zoning board of appeals.
Except it's a pre-existing non-conforming use, that's.
Well, it would be a pre-existing non-conforming use if the applicant, if the property owner were able to prove that it was a pre-existing non-conforming use. And in order to do that,
You just did.
you would need to show that it was being used for the purpose of the storage of, secondhand, used vehicles or junk vehicles, and it was used for that purpose prior to the adoption of the bylaw, which made it unlawful for that particular use, and these are all ands and not ors, and that particular use was continuously for the entire time. Any lapse, I think on your bylaw, it's 2 years. If for 2 years that use was not continued, then it would lapse, it would be what's called discontinued, and the grandfathering would then disappear, and it would no longer be grandfathered. So, but that's on the property owner. That is something that if they say we're quote unquote grandfathered, they need to prove it. And I would note here that I have a letter from the building department that talks about this particular property, and it says here, existing use as listed in the files was a construction yard and cement plant owned by Campanella Corp. The use was extended to the repair of their commercial vehicles for welding operations. In 1985, Mr. Sylvia applied for a variance in accordance with provisions of Article 5.2. Variance was granted and run through the land as stipulated by supposedly recorded deed restriction to allow an area of 300 by 300, 600 feet off Main Street, limit 50 vehicles, with hours of 8 to 5 on Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to noon on Saturday, closed on Sunday. And this is the important part. Any other use of the property except for residential purposes would be strictly forbidden, as all prior uses have long since been abandoned. So what and this is coming from the building department, so what Mr. Merritt was saying essentially is the only protected use of that property is the one that was contained in the 1985 variance. We have a copy of that variance, and that variance specifically says you're not going to have any junk vehicles there. You're gonna have 10 or 15 cars and trucks for sale. Will there be junk or good vehicles? Vehicles will be in good condition for resale. Will there be any junk parts? No. So any use that, and to the extent that there is a grandfather use, it's for a class 2 type license. It's not for this secondhand motor vehicle junk license.
Correct.
All right, I strike that, class 3 motor vehicle junk license. At least for the records we have. And if the property owner has something, something else in their possession, I think they should show it to us, and then more importantly, they should show it to the zoning board of appeals to make a determination, or certainly go forward to Mr. Merritt and ask him.
Have we issued any class 3s in years past?
Every year.
No, not new ones, license renewals, and that's what I taught, when I opened up the meeting, I talked about license renewals, whether it be the Board of Health agent or the building inspector. That is the job of the building inspector, to go out and make sure everything's in compliance year over year. And that's what's aggravating to me, is unfortunately, the ownership changed, and this should have been
Prompted
brought.
extra scrutiny.
This should have been brought to the Board of Selectmen years
The
ago, not.
ownership didn't change, Repwell still owns that. Repwell's
Yeah,
a
well,
corporation.
whatever, the property owner is different now, okay?
No, it's
It's the
not.
same
It's not.
corporation.
There's no owner.
Corporation's a
Repwell
corporation.
It's not right.
You change the stockholders in Coca-Cola, is there a change in ownership? No, the stockholders change. No, there's 5 different, this class 3.
The property transferred ownership
No,
from
No,
Mr.
it did not.
It's not.
It's still Repwell Corporation.
It's still Repwell.
I understand that, but
It's
the
still
property
Repwell
deed changed
Corporation.
No, it
from.
didn't.
No, it didn't change.
It's still
The deed
Repwell
didn't change
Corporation.
at all.
It's still Repwell Corporation.
I can't stand here.
Same deed.
So if I can just say something, Mr. Chairman, so I'm trying to get my head around.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this again. Class 3 license, there's 5 of them. Well, at least 5 here, because this is number 5. Okay? Are there other class 3 licenses that are just strictly junkyards? Because that's what you're kind of telling me, that if you're a
And
junkyard.
that's why I was asking for some clarification on the terms that were being used, because what I wanna get an understanding of, the town of Acushnet reissued class 3s over the years to Repwell. Is that correct?
They did.
That's correct.
Along with, it looks
Okay.
like 4 other ones.
Is that
at
correct,
least.
Jeff?
I believe it is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so that's what I'm trying to get my head around, is that then something in the paperwork triggered an inspection, and that raised to light some of the issues around the class 3. I'm hearing the junkyard term being used, but it doesn't sound like from a definitional standpoint that what they're trying to do there is do a junkyard. So I'm just looking at it from a practical standpoint. It sounds like the town has been renewing the class 3 over there
Along with other
for
ones.
years.
But that makes no, that's.
So now we've discovered that that was a no-no,
Mhm.
right? And so, as the Board of Selectmen, we can't say, okay, we're gonna condone that, right? But what Jeff is saying is that then this should go to the proper board, would be the Board of Appeals.
We don't have to go to the Board of Appeals.
that correct, Jeff?
If this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. Yeah, hey, Jeff,
Well,
Jeff, if I,
No, I'm absolutely saying that, because just because the property, just because you say it's a pre-existing non-conforming use,
Right.
doesn't make it so, especially in light of that letter from Jim Merritt, who says the only use that is grandfathered on that property is the Class 2 license that was established pursuant to the variance.
And why this would.
We all agree, I think we
Yeah,
all
yeah.
agree.
And why this would have to go before the Board of Appeals is because it's located in a residential,
Right.
right? So,
well, it
so
might
that,
not, it might not have been a residential area when
No,
you
I
put the
understand,
junkyard
but
in.
it-
They
but
just
it-
built around it.
I understand that, Mr. Lloyd, Attorney.
Yeah.
But what we're dealing is with now, right? So I'm
Sure.
trying to, we've got some past practices where it sounded like the town was in error, but now we're in a situation where we know now what the landscape is. And so if this was somebody coming in fresh, we'd have to say, we can't do this, you have to go before the Board of Appeals, and that's where essentially this would get litigated.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah.
based on what Selectman Wona said, how can you say that you have to go to the zoning board of appeals where clearly on letter D, section 3.3.1 residential A district, it says prohibited uses, all uses which are not listed above legally non-conforming or otherwise allowable by the provisions of zoning are prohibited. So the zoning board of appeals doesn't have the right to grant a variance and or special permit for something that's not an allowed use.
That's
the
why,
whole-
what I'm saying is, they're not going there. He's making a claim, and under state law, if you had a pre-existing, non-conforming use, you are grandfathered, provided you meet the criteria that I outlined earlier.
Correct.
What council is saying is that the zoning here doesn't matter because we're a pre-existing non-conforming use. My point is that you have to do more than say that. You have to prove it. You have to provide and this should go through zoning because they're the experts on this. You have to provide necessary documentation that shows that you were, number one, in existence prior to the adoption of the zoning that made you illegal, and number two, that you have continued that use continuously for the entire time without any gaps, 2-year gaps. So that's why I say here, to the extent that the argument is, and I think it's a legitimate argument, that you're not allowed here by zoning. His reply is, yeah, we're pre-existing non-conforming. My response to that is, you know what, you may be, but from the evidence that you've presented to us, we don't see that. And that's not just self-activating. You don't just say, we're pre-existing, and oh, okay. So there has to be a determination, and that pre-existing non-conforming use determination is not before you, the local licensing authority, but before zoning. The zoning enforcement officer and ultimately the zoning board of appeals. And I just keep going back to your building department issued a letter back in, I don't have a date on this, But it is from your building department that simply out, it lays out what uses were allowed and what aren't. And at the end of that letter, it's in my packet, it says, any other use of the property except for residential purposes would be strictly forbidden as all prior uses have long since been abandoned. And so, I think the great weight of the evidence before you guys is that it's not allowed. This doesn't even touch on the principal business, right? Because you already have a class 2 license there. So the class 2 has to be the principal business, as does the class 3. So, you know, there is a reasonable interpretation of that statute to say that a principal, means the only, means the major. My brother's earlier analogy of a supermarket saying it's the principal isn't meat. No, the principal use of the business of that business is to sell, food. So its principal business is meat, potatoes, etc., etc. Here, they laid this out. A class 3 is different than a class 2.
So,
Which is different.
Hey, Jeff, Jeff, you say that you can go back in front of the zoning board of appeals, but under section 6, administration, Board of Appeals, section 6.2, number 5 in the bylaw says, use variance shall not be authorized by the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a use variance. What I'm talking about is, if there's a claim that this was a pre-existing non-conforming use, right? That would have, under chapter 48, section 6, that would be grandfathered, all right? However, that's not a determination that the Board of Selectmen makes. It's not a determination that you, as sitting as the local licensing authority under a class 1, 2, or 3 license makes. That's a determination that's made by the zoning board of appeals. And frankly, I think that your zoning enforcement officer has already made that determination with this letter that I see in front of me, and the answer to it is, it's not.
But you know what, Jeff? The zoning board of, the zoning official, the building inspector, he never interviewed any of the representatives from Repwell. He didn't do much research. If he did as much research as Mr. Gasper did, he'd have a lot more information. But it just depends on what you're looking for and what's fed to him. So
It's not incumbent. Once our building commissioner finds what he found, and he made this determination, it's incumbent upon you as a property owner to come back at it and say, well, actually, here's X, Y, and Z.
Correct.
Now, we've continued this hearing a number of times, and we've asked for some documentation to just show us this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. And what we got was the variance, and that's why they issued the class 2, because I think fairly read, the class 2 was part of that use variance. And I agree with your analysis earlier that even though it wasn't recorded, it appears to have been used in accordance with the variance, and so the recording was not fatal. And that's why they issued the class 2. But with respect to this class 3, they're different.
Mr. Chairman?
no, I agree with you. But you know what? There are 2 300 by 300 foot areas. One that they mentioned when they got the class 2 license. There's a separate 300 by 300 foot area which is for the class 3. So when they said in there, are you going to utilize any junk cars in that 300 by 300 foot area for the class 2? And they said no. Well, they were correct. But there is another section. So to say they agree that they were not going to have junk cars, yeah, in that area they agreed to it.
Mr. Chairman?
Okay, well, the simple fact of the matter is that the zoning enforcement officer, I believe, based on this letter that's before me, has taken the same interpretation as I am, that the only grandfathered use of that property is for the, and it's not even grandfathered, right, because it's pursuant to a use variance.
Yep.
So I think that even though you may have an argument that there were other uses on the property and we're just dissecting the property, there's no evidence of that. And he says any other use of the property except the extent that you've got documentation and you want to move forward and make your argument, I don't think the pre-existing non-conforming use argument at this point is something the Board of Selectmen, are entitled to make.
So, Jeff-
The evidence before them is, it's not an allowed use.
So Jeff, we've got two options, right? We could either say, yes, it's a class, we think a class 3 is okay, approve it, and we're done, right? Or we could say, based on all of the information we have here, it's not allowed because it's in a residential zone, so on and so forth. We deny it, but then the applicant could challenge that via the Board of Appeals. Is that correct?
Well, he could go to the Board of Appeals, go to the zoning enforcement officer first, then go to the Board of Appeals to find out if it is a pre-existing non-conforming use. And then at that point, there's nothing that would prevent him from reapplying once he has in his hand something from the zoning that says this is an allowed use in this district. Then the issue would be, as I've indicated before, whether or not you could have two principal businesses
Right.
on the site.
Right, because what I'm getting at is that I can't speak for Mr. DeRoche or Mr. Gasper. I kind of have a feeling where Mr. Gasper is, gentlemen. There's a lot of moving parts here, right? And we're going to take into account the residents, your abutters. You know, I've seen letters about abrevieties and reasonable accommodations to make it work for everybody.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to me that the Board of Selectmen is the appropriate body to approve what your business plan might be moving forward. That it would be the ZBA, based on hearing from Jeff. So I would just assume that this board deny this based on what the current state of play is, and urge you to take your case to the ZBA with all of the information, your full business plan. That's a little more deliberate process where the residents come in, they've got abutters are notified. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I think there's more than one and two options here. Approve it, deny it. Well, the third option is you can table this and send it to the Board of Appeals. And why are you gonna stop them doing business when the Board of Appeals is gonna be the ultimate authority here?
Well,
It's the third option.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know that you can quote unquote send it to the Board of Appeals. I think that.
You don't have to send it to the Board of
because
Appeals.
they're a different judicial body than the board. Like they're like.
No, we can agree that they're gonna go in front of the Board of Appeals. If the Board of Appeals denies this, then the Class 3 license disappears. And we're fine with that. But it looks like, based on the fact, you don't have all the facts of whether or not this is a non-conforming pre-existing use. So if the Board of Appeals is the body to decide that, just table this and we'll immediately appeal, we'll file an appeal with the Board of Appeals.
I don't know that it's an appeal there. I think you need to.
Because there's nothing to
No,
appeal.
just to make a determination.
Yeah, well, go through the zoning enforcement officer first, and then his determination.
We can
then
appeal
be
his
appealed
decision.
to the-
Correct.
Yeah.
So it really shouldn't, so we could take no action on this, have them go forward and then go before the ZBA.
Yep.
And then if they determine, Jeff, if they determine yes or no, and then it comes back to us.
No,
Jeff, I still don't understand how it's being construed. If let's just pretend there's nobody in the room right now and somebody came in to Jim Barrett's, to the zoning enforcement officer's office and said, I want to put a salvage yard in XYZ location, can I do it? I would believe Mr. Merritt's gonna say no, because it's not an allowed use under our zoning bylaws, and it hasn't been since prior to 1973, it was never an allowed use. What's confusing is how the hell has any Class 3 license been issued in this town? Because I've gone back in all the zoning bylaw books, and it's not an allowed use. And the reality of it is our zoning bylaws, even back in the 80s, 70s, everywhere else, it says there's under conditions of a special permit, which is who's the special permit granting authority. Some cases it's planning board, some cases it's Board of Selectmen, some cases it's the planning board. So if it's not an allowed use under the bylaws, how was, even back in the 70s or 80s when this happened, if it wasn't an allowed use, how does zoning board of appeals go, Yeah, it's not an allowed use anywhere in our bylaws, but I'll let it be an allowed use in this zoning. How does that occur?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if the zoning was adopted in 1952, and in 1951, this was a vehicle, auto junkyard, whatever the terminology is. And they kept that use all the way up through to today. Even though the town has a bylaw that says absolutely, positively, no class 3 licenses, then it would still be grandfathered under zoning.
I understand that.
So that's what I'm saying. So they're making a claim that their grandpa, we're saying here that we're not gonna grant you this license because it's not allowed by zoning. You haven't proven to us that it's grandfathered, so it's not a suitable place. Zoning, there's no sense in issuing a license that you can't use under zoning. And they're saying, oh, no, we're grandfathered. What I'm saying is, you can't just make that determination. You've gotta go somewhere to get that made, and the place to go would be to the zoning enforcement officer and then up to the ZBA. If the ZBA ultimately says, yep, we think that you had a junkyard there in 1951 and you used it the whole time, then, zoning is no longer an issue. Then the issue will be whether or not you can have two principal places of business for purposes of chapter 140, section 58.
How can the board, we've given enough, all this time on this license so that people could come forward with the pertinent information to show where a special permit was granted to operate and things of the like, or a variance, and that hasn't been provided to the Board of Selectmen. So how do we expect that to occur through the zoning enforcement officer after his letters have been written to the Board of Selectmen, and/or how are we expected for the zoning board of appeals to make a rational judgment and not a political judgment on that? If there's never been anything presented to us over all of these months that have gone by, will we expect somebody to pull a rabbit out of that?
I think what you can do is you can deny the application. There's no repetitive petition prohibition. So you deny the application, they get their ducks in a row for zoning, and then they come back.
There's no application, we already have the license. It's not an application, this license has been issued right through January of 2022.
You deny the renewal. There is.
It's already been renewed.
That's not, I don't know what that, he's talking about something that came from the.
You signed it.
What's the date?
No, what's the date on that?
No,
Yeah.
That's
Rachel,
all
Well, you take a look at it.
Rachel did.
December 2020,
That's the one that was,
Kevin Gasper, that's your
Spelled.
signature right there?
no, that's a stamp, sir.
Oh, okay.
That's a stamp that was used, well, we got the letters to prove it, we sent the letters out saying that was stamped by a part-time secretary in our office, and Miss Leonard's not the one that did it, because I asked, how did that get out, because I seen the letters, and they're inside of here, saying that they were sent out in error, and something about refunding monies, that's on,
Mr. Gasper, let me ask you something, and the members of the board, you can chip in. That's number 5 for Class 3 licenses. Does any of you know where the other 4 are in the town? And if they are, do they have any other businesses there? Why is this license the one that's being persecuted? I don't understand it. I understand it, and I'm gonna let you know it afterwards, that I understand why this is being done. But there's 4 other licenses. This one is being done for pure political reasons. And you just mentioned, I'm sure nothing's done for political, but this is being done for political reasons.
absolutely is not.
Really? You do that much research on the other 4?
This is the only one that's in question and that was held by Mr. Barrett, sir. So the reality of it is, unless and until I get a complaint or a notice from the zoning enforcement officer, holding of licenses for outstanding
Okay,
issues,
I
that's what
understand.
we're doing.
Okay, I understand.
So, we can say it's political or whatnot, but
Well, it is,
Mr.
but-
Cinerizio wasn't the owner of the property when these letters went out when we started doing this, so. Simply said, it has changed hands because I got a copy of the deed and the deed says it changed
You don't have
hands.
a copy of the deed, the deed's in Repwell.
Okay.
You have a copy of the deed there, can I see it?
Yep.
Okay, what's it say on the deed? Read it. Read the grantee clause and grantor.
Well, I'm sorry? It says May 19th day of November 2020 by Repwell Corp. of Massachusetts Corporation, collectively mortgagee, and its principal place of business, Street, da-da-da, Webster Bank, and all that other happy horse stuff. And then it says, go into, in the back, it gives the name, and I believe it says on the back, it was to Shania Blake, which is Mr. Cinerizio's girlfriend. So,
Who's the grantor on that deed? Repwell?
granting clause, commercial, I don't know, and,
It's the same entity. Repwell owned it, they still own it.
well,
It's not
it's
a.
got a sale price of
it-
$500 and some odd thousand dollars on
For the
it.
stock.
I don't necessarily think for the purposes of the issue that we're talking about, whether or not it was conveyed is really relevant. The issue.
No, it isn't relevant, it's just, the point
Yeah.
is, the property was not deeded out of Repwell, it's still in Repwell, they say it as a stock transfer.
Okay.
Repwell Corporation held title to that property, it's still Repwell. There's no change in ownership, and there's no change in the way the business has been done since 1974.
Well, Mr. Attorney Williams, I'm still going back to the beginning again. There's no information that has been provided to myself or the board that said a variance was granted for a Class 3 license.
Because it wasn't, and you're correct there.
So, there's my situation, and now it's brought up that there's the 300 by 300 feet for the Class 2, but now there's been no variance granted or anything, but there's another area, 300 by 300, that's allowed for the Class
That you issued a
3
license
license.
for. That you issued a license for, and whether or not they stamped your name or not,
When was the
people are
variance?
stamping
When
names.
was the
He
variance?
hasn't voted.
It's not a variance.
You know, when was the
It's-
well, a variance needs to be.
No, it doesn't have to. If it's a non-conforming pre-existing use, you don't need to have a variance.
Right, well, that's what you're saying, it's non-existing well.
Well, maybe that's their,
Maybe
maybe
non-existent.
it's their job to go prove that to the Board of Appeals. We can have the building inspector deny it, we can appeal the building inspector's decision to the Board of Appeals. And that's fine, why don't you just send it over that way, so it's not a political vote here, and it saves you, everyone here face.
I mean, the only thing that
So the way
again, I
that
can't get my head
would
around.
deny the application without prejudice, you
Right.
would go and do whatever you need to do, and then you come back.
That's what I suggested, right? But I still can't get my head around is the fact that the town issued Class 3 licenses. All right, if you take this year out of the equation, because it was sent out, so from 2019, how far back? Like,
Well, there's at least five of them,
Forever.
because we're number
Right.
five.
So that's what I'm trying to get my head
Forever,
around,
so,
right?
so,
And we're number five,
to be
but-
fair to you,
What are you doing with
it
the
raised,
first
it raised the eyebrows of when this came across, and me being chairman of the board.
Mr.
There
Mayor.
are other Class 3s that you, when you look at them, we can make the same case that they're clearly not junk
So, but
yards.
here's the issue,
Correct.
right?
That case,
Correct, and are you
So that's
gonna
very
do that- Are you
concerning.
gonna do the same research on that one,
that's,
Mr. Gaspar?
I already have started looking at that, and I said, you know what, there's a couple of them out there.
Yeah.
There's one left out there, where if you Google Earth it, okay, like I did
Yeah.
with this one, that's no longer in existence, okay?
Okay.
And I Google Earth it, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's only 4 licenses, right? There's the one on Slocum, the Lake Hawk,
There's
and then
4.
the LeBlanc, and then this one.
Yeah.
So I did do that, and that became even more disturbing to me when I looked at it and said, well, wait a minute. This isn't a junkyard either. So, yeah, I have done that as well, and that raises those questions. But again, this is the one that Mr. Merritt held, sir, and that's why we're up for discussion. Look, I have no problem, I was in this business, and I actually had a conversation with your client, and I said, you know what? I understand the business better than most people do. Having a junkyard, or a salvage yard is two different things. A junkyard versus a salvage yard, where if your client happened to have 10 or 20 vehicles off to the side, which those days are over, that Mr. Sheridan said, I'll go pull a radiator out of this car. Radiators aren't transferable from one vehicle to another. They gotta match the make and model. I was in the business, so that era is kinda gone. But I've had this conversation with young Mark Cinerizio, at his property, maybe a month ago, Mr. Cinerizio, I was there, and I told him, I said, you know what, I don't have a problem if you were to have so many junk cars over there where you were able to pull things off, and you know, that's what they, in today's world, everybody posts this stuff online and sells parts and make a living doing it. I don't have a problem with that at all. But to have a junk yard where you have junk, like some of these pictures show from I guess the resident now, because I'm told by my administrative assistant that wasn't taken by my building commissioner, that a junk yard and having some junk cars, I believe is two different things. And the pictures show what I would define as more of a junkyard, where you just got crap and debris and tipped over buses and things
You
of
don't
the
wanna
like.
do that, though.
So I understand the business model very well, and I'm not saying I'm opposed, and I never would be, because we talked about it when we issued the class 2, and I said I wish I had that opportunity to give him that opportunity to continue making more money. And if I actually told Mr. Cinerizio while I was at his property, I said, you got 20, 30 cars off to the side and you're pulling parts and selling them and you're disposing of them once you've taken all the good stuff off, right? And we all know in the business what's worth money and what's not. It's the person that opens a junk yard and actually strips a car off and then just lets it sit on the ground for 2 or 3 years and never disposes it to the scrap yard where it technically should go after I'm done hawking the good stuff off of it.
I fully agree with that. You know something?
That's what I'm-
So you, as a board, you can take that class 3 license and you put limitations on it so he can do exactly what you thought, you said that he could do.
How about
So why don't you do that? You take that
But
class
the
3.
issue
Hold on,
is-
hold on,
the
hold
issue
on.
though
I
is-
want to give Mr. Cinerizio an opportunity to say whatever he wants to say.
How about cutting the number of cars
Can you
down
let
from,
me
say,
in?
100 to
I'm trying to get
75?
into my phone. Can you let me into the Zoom? Sorry.
I think,
Oh.
so,
You are in the Zoom, aren't you?
Alright,
Hold on.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say one more thing? So the town has been issuing class,
He's in.
the town's been issuing this class 3
Yeah.
for years upon years. Mr. Cinerizio goes and buys the property under the assumption that there's a valid class 3. So he
Correct.
drops $500,000, right? I think that was what you said, whatever the number was,
Whatever the number
for that
is.
property, thinking that he's got a class 3.
Correct.
Finds out that the town has screwed up for all these years. The town pumps the brakes because we say, look, now that we know there's an issue, we can't in good faith violate the bylaw. So I think and we also know there's gotta be some reasonable accommodations made or whatever to address some of the neighbors.
Yep.
So that's what we're trying to provide an off-ramp to say, Board of Selectmen right now, in good faith, couldn't reissue this license, given all of that. The ZBA is the appropriate judicial body to take into account whether or not you wanna cut it down to 50 or 25 or put up trees like they do with anywhere else. It's kinda like, I feel like we've gotta meet in the middle,
I think
which is because of our
I
past
think
practice.
the Board of
over the
Selectmen
years.
and Mr. Blake's letters that we were sent on Mr., not to mention, well, I'm gonna mention it because it's no longer a business, Mr. Faria's Class 2 license over here, okay? He absolutely said we can do it and issue it with conditions, right, and stipulations. So I think,
You can do the class 2 with conditions too.
no, the Class 2's already taken, he's already
I'm
got
not
that.
talking about class 2, I'm talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
class
yeah,
3.
I know, I understand that, but as far as the Class 3 goes, we could absolutely take that option too. We have it somewhere, Mr.
Yeah, limit them down. So many cars and they can just use them for, just like what you just said, and they're fine with that.
I mean, so I'm trying to be
I
clear.
believe we agreed on that.
Mr.
before, right?
Cinerizio,
Yeah.
Mark, you know damn well I was at your facility and I had that conversation with you, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
To be fair, so we can say, what you said, this is political, there's nothing political between me and this
No,
gentleman
I
here.
understand.
His father's doing something, running against me, I'll let that all out in, that doesn't matter to me,
No.
sir, okay, it really doesn't matter to me. What I gotta do is uphold the bylaws of the town of Acushnet. And I had a conversation with this young man, and I know this young man, and I think this young man's a very good young man. We have mutual friends, and I'll tell you right now, this crap right here has caused a little bit of heartache between me and this gentleman right here. So let me vet that out right now on here, so nobody at home thinks anything about it. And I don't like it because I think this man right here is a damn good man. So I'm gonna put that on the record right now and clear the record straight, because I don't want my integrity being compromised, because this video is gonna go out to my residents. So I'm gonna make that very well known to you right now. I'm not trying to hurt that kid
Okay.
because of what's going on in this political position. I want that to be understood.
But it is the only one of the class 3 licenses that's.
I understand
that's being brought
that,
before the board.
and I've had the
It was
conversation.
only one that
Which is
was-
curious,
it
and
was only
it's
held by
curious, and
the-
maybe it's coincidental, but
It was
Yeah,
held by
just what
the
you said with that
enforcement
class
manager.
three,
This is the only one, and you know what, I told you before, I'm a better man than that. I've already looked at these other ones, and I've already raised the eyebrows. Miss Hebert's our town administrator, and I said to her, I think we have a problem here, and we need to address this in this town.
But the other people have businesses too. and
I
you
understand,
You can't
but-
do that to them.
But that's fine,
Uh-huh.
no, that's
Yeah.
fine, but do we allow, and shame on me, because I have issued this permit, okay? But it's not my job to go out and do the inspections until I get letters like this, okay? And concerns with their health. And I went out as a man and I spoke to this gentleman right here. And I said, you know what, I don't have any problems if you were to put up some abrevieties, because that's quite honestly what the law states, is you should be shaded it in and everything else. And I told him, I said, you have 25, 30 vehicles stuffed over there with, vehicles, not, buses and garbage and pallets and truck bodies, 18-wheelers full with crap where rats are gonna come in and we're not gonna have a problem. I told him that right to his face, didn't I, Mr. Cinerizio?
I don't remember the specifics, but I remember you coming down and.
You know
we had a
what, Kevin,
conversation.
you can take that class 3 license and put those restrictions in there, because there are restrictions in there already.
I've looked at the
Get rid
100,
of the 100 cars, no one wants to buy 100
I've looked at the 100 cars, and you know what?
No one wants
And
to
that's
do
what
it.
spurred me to look at the other licenses,
but
and
no
I said,
one-
that's bull crap.
No one
It
wants to
should
put
never
it
be
there.
allowed, because we've had problems with contamination of soil from junkyards,
Yeah, oh,
okay?
yeah.
I'm very well aware of all of that too, because I do my due diligence, and I think that's
I'm not saying you
a
don't.
more outstanding problem for whoever's gonna be on this board, needs to start looking at this with a better eye. And shame on my zoning enforcement officer for never bringing this to our attention at an earlier date.
No, but like I said,
So-
you do have the ability to put restrictions on there.
And
You should
I
do
I don't like the idea of this gentleman being compromised, because his dad is on the ZBA, so he's gonna have to be excluded from that vote anyway, so now it brings it to 4. Now it needs to be all 4 that vote in favor and puts that license in jeopardy for this young man. So you see what I'm doing now?
No, just keep the class 3 that you got here and just put a restriction on it.
I understand that, that's why I'm
Then-
trying to, that's why I'm
That
keeping
would
this
be a
conversation.
good compromise,
I
right?
mean, I don't think the zoning
Tell
board
them
of
you gotta
appeals,
put arborvitae's around everything here, or whatever, make
That's on the
restrictions.
way right now. The guy came down and gave me an estimate, that's working.
Yeah,
That's
I mean, you're
I'm
gonna
sorry,
shoot.
Mark, I want Mr. Cinerizio to speak.
The arborvitae things are that's worked on now. The landscaper came down Monday, not this Monday, apparently, last Monday. Walked it off and told me, and when he gets, I think he said at the end of May, he's gonna start cleaning, and I'm gonna start planting the arborvitae's along that roadway right there, that the neighbor on that side. We discussed that some months ago.
You willing to cut the cars down from 100?
Yeah,
So
I
what?
mean, I only.
We haven't determined yet if this is even allowed in this area. So we're assuming it's grandfathered in. That's what your statements are being right now. And I can't go into that assumption. Okay, I still don't have any evidence if a variance was granted for a junk 3 or a class 3 license. And I'll quit using the name junk, but a class 3 license. Okay, so that's an issue I have. Is it still allowed? We can, work this through, but we haven't determined if a variance has been ever granted for this particular thing for a class 3. We just have not come to that. I have not seen any information.
The only thing,
Wait,
Dave, that resembles a variance would be the fact that the town has issued class 3 licenses. Seems in perpetuity.
Or were there any variances when those were?
Regardless though, but I mean, I get it, right?
Right.
In a perfect world, there would be a variance somewhere, but there wasn't. And somebody, back in the day, back in the
1991 is the first
So
year
from-
that we have
91.
evidence.
91?
We actually have evidence that there was a variance
from-
granted.
No, the license.
So from
Some
1990,
license.
1991
Hold on,
until
for the record,
2019.
we know, based on some minutes that we dug out of the cellar, and I have a copy of those minutes, that 1991 was when there was actually multiple other licenses issued, approved by the Board of Selectmen in 1991. We know that we've been issuing one to Repwell Corp. far back as 1991.
But you also know that before 1991, there were facilities here that were utilized as a so-called junkyard.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, put limitations on this guy, and make them put screening, limit the number of cars, and limit the number of, just like what Kevin said. You're gonna be able to utilize these for parts, and then the carcass leaves. You don't keep it there. It is money in the carcass. There's money there in the car.
So
No
from-
one's gonna leave it there like an old-time junkyard. They don't do that anymore.
So from 91 until 2021, they had a
2020.
class,
Okay.
they had a class 3 license issued every single year. So,
Right,
for-
it could have been an error, so if,
but
if
Dave, I
that doesn't
understand that.
matter, or-
Well, it
30
does,
years of
I mean,
that doesn't matter?
it's of
It does
concern.
matter.
It is
It
of
does
concern, but, I mean, that'd be like, you know, you buying a house, you pay your mortgage for 30 years, and you find out that the deeds, it was never registered, and now you're not ownership of your home, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're like, hey, wait a minute.
There's an equitable solution here. It's
There's
in
gotta be an
equity.
offering
It might
that
not
meets
be
everybody in the
legally,
middle, you know?
but you need to do an equitable solution for this guy. Paid over $500,000 for the stock in a corporation that he thought he had a class 2 license, class 3 license. He paid money based on the fact that the town for 20 years issued a license. And then all of a sudden, and he's saying, I don't care for the 100 cars. I don't need the 100 cars. I don't need to have it as a traditional junkyard. Put limitations on there that he can only do this, and this. And if he doesn't like it, then he goes to the board.
My
But I think
only
that's an
question
easy
is,
solution.
is it allowed? That's my
Well,
question.
none of those are allowed.
So I can't start giving licenses to things that aren't allowed, but if we tweak it this way and that way, then
Yeah,
okay,
licenses
yeah,
were
maybe it's
already given.
allowed. You know,
Licenses were
You
already
gave a
given.
license.
I licensed, but
They were already
what
given.
precipitated the issuing of the first license?
Unless
What
it-
did? Was a variance granted that says you can have a class 3? And there's no evidence that there was a variance granted
Either
for
way,
a class
whatever
3,
you
and now
against
there's
or for.
another area 300 by 300 that's not described in the class 2 license. So now there's 2 areas of 300 by
They're
300
both
that
described.
vehicles can be there,
On both licenses, they're both described.
you know?
And separate. But you know
But-
what?
but when
You-
they give you
got
a
at least you got at least 5 licenses in town. If none of them were granted a variance, which they probably weren't, because it seems like everything was loosey-goosey over a long period of time. If none of them was granted a variance, then you've got 5 licenses that are illegal. And if you're gonna get rid of
I know.
Rockwell's license, you gotta get rid of the others. And I don't
Right.
wanna see that happen to anyone's business. And I
So
don't
I-
think you do
so I
either. You
gotta-
get in the business.
Well, I'd like to pipe up just for a minute here.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Under chapter 140B, there is such a thing as a straight junkyard. We're talking about a class 3 junk
Exactly.
vehicle.
Yeah.
All
Exactly.
right, and I think Selectman DeRoche properly said, I'm not gonna continue to call this junk, it's a class 3 license.
Correct.
So the issue is, with respect to the other ones that were issued, if they were in fact issued in the correct, in an area where zoning allowed it, then there may not be an issue with theirs. The issue with yours is, as Mr. DeRoche continues to say, is that you are in a residential area, you are grandfathered, or you have a variance to conduct a class 2 license. There's no variance, there's no nothing for the class 3, other than you saying, we've got a pre-existing non-conforming use because we've been doing it for 50 years. You very well may, but that's not something that's before the board, and I keep going back to, because it's the only determination I've seen with respect to zoning. I go back to this letter from Jim Merritt that says, the only use that's grandfathered on this property, he didn't say on a 300 by 300 foot area, the only use that's grandfathered on this property is the one that is being conducted pursuant to the variance. I go back to the variance, that's clearly a class 2. So there continues to be an issue as to whether or not you could use a class 3 license on that area, on
Class
that
2
area.
states 300 by
Because
300,
it's
600 feet off the
residential.
street. That,
Well,
class 2 states that.
Jim did sign a business license in 2018, which it has his signature on it, and he wrote on the business license that the property is in compliance with, what do you call it, non-conforming?
Pre-existing non-conforming use.
non-conforming use. So
I haven't
he
seen
visited,
that.
he visited the property,
What's,
Well,
excuse me,
there's-
can you give me that? You have that?
I don't have that.
You,
I'm sorry.
somebody just picked it up and it's, we
No,
have it
no, no,
somewhere.
No, I gave you the class 3 license.
Yes, we do. It was
It's hanging right
provided, I had a copy of it somewhere too. I thought you
Class
just
three?
had that in your hand.
We just gave it to you.
I gave you the
No,
class 3
no,
license.
no, not this, I'm sorry.
No,
I
okay.
thought you had that certificate from, I think Miss
I wish I
LeBonnie signed. You're
did.
talking about the one Miss LeBonnie signed off as well?
Yeah, and Jim.
And Jim.
But he actually.
But what was
physically-
that for? Wasn't that for something like a fuel
Business.
license or
No,
something?
no, this is a
Yeah,
town
every-
business license.
Yeah.
He actually came
You got a
down.
copy of this?
I don't have a
Oh, for
copy.
crying out loud. What, am I the only one with copies of paper around here?
I mean, he,
It's not my,
Jim, we're
it's
going
not
on
my
an hour and a half.
purview.
Hey, Devin, neither one of us have that one.
I mean, he physically came down,
That's
talked to me,
nice.
told me about the 2 licenses and where they could be, and he signed the business license and
Right.
says, non-conforming use, blah, 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 blah.
Pre-existing non-conforming.
And that was the business license in 2018 that was filed with the town, and we still have a copy of it, so.
I think, unfortunately, I know there's been too many mistakes.
Yeah.
End of story. I can't even explain
Mhm.
how badly certain things have been done. And I'm not just saying about this license, right, where we've had the broader discussion now. It blows my mind, but I'll keep it simple, and I'm gonna leave it at that. It blows my mind that this is where this board needs to be, and as Selectman Warner just said, we've blown an hour, whatever it's been,
Thank God you got
discussing
that
this.
before.
Thank God I'm getting paid by the hour.
Yeah.
But I
You know what, though,
apologize,
with
I
all-
apologize for it, but it all stems, and I'm just gonna say it because I'm starting to get aggravated at ignorance, right? Is from people not doing their jobs properly. That's what this comes down to, and it's extremely frustrating. And then when you open up the can of worms where it comes to class 2, class 3, it makes me stop wondering about what the hell's going on with my common vic licenses and my restaurants, and are we doing that before we're issuing all of this stuff? Because technically, it's all supposed to be inspected.
Yeah.
And that just raises and it makes my head spin. And it's all there to protect the common good of our community, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be a common vic license at a restaurant to make sure that we're eating safe food and drinking safe drinks and whatever the nature of it is, and the same thing for our residential. It says in our bylaws, no more intensive or offensive to the neighborhood and the residents of the community.
But you know what, you probably have the same thing with the other 4 licenses of neighbors complaining. And maybe this is a way for you to restrict them. I mean, you can issue the class 3, but put such restrictions on there that allows someone to earn a living, but doesn't impact the neighbors, and make them put fencing up. I go in front of all the boards in most other towns. Acushnet, not too often, but you know what? I have no problem in putting restrictions on there that protect the neighbors and protect the business. I mean, but when a guy pays $500,000 for a business and they've been issuing a license for 20 years, it's kind of hard to say, we're taking away the whole thing, but no one wants 100 cars, no one wants a junkyard, you know? I think you're right, Dave, you know, it's like, it's not a junkyard. You know, if the guy has a car here or there, he's cannibalizing the parts and gets rid of the carcass, limit it and what he can do. You can take that existing license that you've already issued and they'll be fine and reissuing that with more restrictions in it.
One
Gotta put
last
up
question,
shielding.
this motor vehicle junk license, is that a term set by the town or is that mass general law? Because I think that's misleading in itself, and as we're looking at bylaw reform and, you know, going to town meeting and hiring a town council, hiring a consultant to look at all of our bylaws, it's these type of antiquated terms that
Right.
confuse people,
Yeah.
right?
It is from the general.
It's not, there's no allowed use anywhere in the town, and I think that it was,
Yeah, no, I got it.
it was never, I don't know when it was ever, if I can't find it. I went back to when I was 4 years old from the bylaw books, all the way back to like 1973, right? And I'm trying to find, was it ever allowed use? Nope.
Probably not.
And we all know, well, what we should all know is bylaws should become more restrictive, not less restrictive, right? When it comes to things of this kind of nature, because, let's be honest, you don't want them popping up all over your community, right? However, if somebody was operating one 20 or 30 years ago, as I know some people were, and One of them today I look at via Earth, and it's still active. You can still see stuff all over the property. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, but you know what, I know.
You can't-
When people look at the scope of the licenses, and you see someone could actually put 100 cars there, I mean, if I was a neighbor, I'd freak out too, you know what I mean, but.
That's a junkyard.
It's a junkyard, yeah, but if you limit it down and put restrictions on it, you gotta have shielding, you gotta put arborvitae's around, it's gonna be shielded.
Totally. The thing is, I think with David, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, my concern is, now that we know that it was an error, now that we know that it's in a class 3 in a residential, which is not allowed by bylaw, if the Board of Selectmen renew this, we're setting precedent moving forward, right? But if we were to say, no, just not because we're against it, but just no, to activate the process of the ZBA, to then put in all of those accommodations, the neighbors would come into a hearing, and then I think this would be the opportunity to reset this, and then moving forward, you'd be fine, with all of those accommodations. But if the board approves this now, knowing what we know, we would be setting precedent moving forward.
Maybe not.
Well, we could be breaking the law too. I mean, if it's not allowed and we go and say, okay, go ahead, reduce the car size, we'll all work together, and then it's not allowed, well, then we're going against.
Well, if it's not
bylaws
allowed
and
use, then
zoning.
you're gonna stick the building inspector on everyone else that has a class 3, because that's, you can't just limit it.
Listen, I keep saying to you, there's a difference between a straight up junkyard and a junk vehicle class 3 license.
Right.
The bylaw strictly prohibits junkyards.
This ain't a junkyard.
However,
It's
there
not
may
a
be
junkyard.
another area in town that allows a class 3 junk vehicle license, but there's no doubt in the zone that you're in, it's strictly residential.
That's the issue. That's the issue.
Strictly residential, so.
I was there
the
way
other
before
licenses that you keep
residential.
bringing up,
When did it become a
Way
residential
before
zone?
It's the whole, so when I look back on, and I got a lot of different records of, I tried following the
Yeah.
trail to see maybe, it wasn't in 1973, but maybe, as you used the words, I think it was cockamanian, maybe in 1985, bylaws changed and somebody slipped that in, right? Because we know how things are in politics.
Yeah.
Can slip that in, and then all of a sudden, 3 years later, oh, that's gotten taken back out just to allow certain things to happen. So I tried following that trail, and I got a whole boatload of bylaw books in here and all the dates, okay? And never was an allowed use in it. We only had one district in 1973. The whole town was blanketed as residential. End of story. There was no other districts. It was all
So
residential.
everything's,
Everything was
everything's
residential.
illegal.
It was a free-for-all.
Everything's illegal.
It was,
Yeah.
I don't wanna start saying that everything's illegal when it comes to other people's licenses. I'm just, all we're doing is trying to have the conversation wrapped around this, and it really aggravates me that we're in the situation that we're in, to be clear. It's really frustrating, and then when you take this one, as I always do, is say, okay, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, let me go look at the other ones, and I'm like, oh boy, look what this one is. And guess what? It's not in the business village district, it's not in a business commercial district, it's in a residential district. So you're right.
Well, if the whole town is residential, obviously, everything is in the residential district.
And that's the problem, though, when you read the bylaws, even back then, the zoning board of appeals, yes, they have rights, but if you read the bylaws, the zoning board of appeals does not have the right, in my opinion, to say, it's gotta be, first of all, it's gotta say in the bylaws, this is the permitted uses, and then it usually says in bylaws, permitted uses by special permit, and it'll give you another subcategory, right?
Or you get a use variance.
But use variances, that was section 5.2 of the old bylaws. Okay, I'm very familiar with all of this crap, and I have it all memorized. It was section 5.2 of the old bylaws, and I have the letters from the building inspectors back then that gave Mr. Sylvia and said, nope, denied, you need to go for a use variance. So that was allowed back then, but use variances are no longer allowed. That's the problem, and I just.
Are we in a hearing, Mr.? This is a hearing, Mr.
This
Chairman?
is a public hearing.
Public hearing. I'd like to offer a motion that we continue this, and then bring in the residents of the area, and invite the resident, the abutters in that area, and then
And we can come in with maybe some more
try to go find some
information to show
additional
that this
information,
is
because we're not
in
gonna figure
existence
this out
right
tonight,
now.
right? And then if there's an opportunity to resolve this at some point, but it's obviously not gonna happen tonight, and we're gonna be here till midnight, just going back and forth, back and forth.
There was
back and
7
forth.
licenses in 1991, sir.
So, I'm not ready to vote on this
What-
either
what
way.
class
And it was called,
Kevin, class threes?
I'm sorry?
Class threes? You talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's 2 different categories of the minutes that we pulled, and I have the copy of that, from December 16th, 1991. So they did class 2s, there was a boatload of them, and then there was class 3s, and there was 7 of them, in 1991.
We're 5, so I don't know how many are up
There's
there.
only 4 left.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to continue.
There's only
the
4
hearing.
left. It's
After
it's
this?
because, yeah, because you gotta remember, there was one that went out,
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Recently, in 2019. That,
Yeah.
that license was, that property was sold. 0 Beach Road.
Okay.
So,
Well,
the reality of it is, it's
Yeah, I know, you guys
Mr.
are in a
Chairman?
predicament, you've got, things have been loosey-goosey for a long period of time, and
I've got, my problem is I've got letters from my zoning enforcement officer, that's my problem. And he's taken this out, and I've told him, your words, not mine.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make, I made a motion to continue the hearing to a date certain, or date uncertain.
I think we need to do a date certain.
Okay.
It's a
Yeah, we
public
do
hearing.
need to, we need,
Date and time certain.
right.
Next time we meet then,
get the summer coming up, big.
we meet on the 17th, right? Would that be the next time?
So,
Maybe in the interim, maybe they can show the
Can I-
zoning enforcement officers
when I-
some evidence.
I don't know where my council got kicked off of the Zoom.
Yeah, I know, I hit the wrong
He
thing.
got kicked off.
So I don't know how this is gonna play out, because we don't know, there's an election December 15th, okay? And I don't know if I'm gonna be here or not. Plain and simple, nobody ever does when it comes to elections, right?
I know.
So it's, the reality of it is I'd hate to put anybody in a position where we don't know, but he won't be able to vote.
Yeah, correct.
That's
And then you
immaterial,
leave it,
Mr.
and
Chairman.
then you leave it with 2,
Yep.
and it could end up in a tie, so where does it end up there?
Okay, so then
Is
let's
it a
go, let's go
stalemate?
down the road. Here's the deal. Motion to
Wednesday.
continue, no, just hear me out. I'll make a motion to continue until May 17th. If that fails for lack of second, then I'll offer a motion to deny. If that fails for lack of second, then I'll offer a motion to approve with some restrictions. I just wanna move on from this, whether or not we have an election or not.
I'm just stating the facts, because again, I don't want anybody, and I think that most people know my character, I don't want anybody to believe that this is political, but I can't determine the outcome of an election. And if that occurs, this young man right here, okay, which I have no hard feelings for, and I've already let that be known, he could be the one paying the consequences for that, so, and I don't think that's fair.
I don't think that's
No,
it.
you know something?
Well, I think push it beyond the election.
Yeah, I don't see why, I mean, you can, I think continuing this isn't gonna kill it, and if you wanna get some input from some of the neighbors, let them come in.
That's
That
what
won't change the
I
zone.
like to hear. I mean, honestly,
I mean, hey,
election or no election, push this on, unless there's a yes vote to approve it,
now,
doesn't matter.
not
I don't
to- if you
think
had
I'm
Ralph
hearing this.
Mackham still here, he would know everything about this, because he knew everything about the town.
When are we gonna meet next? Again, I put the motion on the
We'll
table.
have a special meeting for this.
No, our selectmen.
It has to be, because it would have to be a continuance of the public hearing, and it has to be a date
Right, and you
certain.
have to be at the, you can't substitute someone, I mean, I believe.
I don't know about that.
If someone else is on the board and they weren't at the first public hearing,
Life goes on. What about if you quit tomorrow? Like, you can't, you know what I mean? Like, you
I'm just
can't.
asking a question.
Yeah.
I don't
You
know.
know, I'm just
I don't
saying,
know.
I mean,
And it's 2 votes,
you know,
no matter what.
Life goes
You,
on.
you do, but the problem is my opponent's his father.
But that doesn't matter.
And if he can't vote, which he can't, because he's a director,
He won't be able to.
it's a
vote.
conflict of interest,
I
right?
agree with you.
So what happens if they go separate ways? He
Um,
votes one way and he votes another way. That puts this young
But I
man.
think we've established, if
Doesn't get
it's a
denied.
vote in
Doesn't get-
favor.
Doesn't get approved, doesn't get denied.
Right, but hold on, if there's a vote in favor, then he moves on. If it's a vote to deny, he goes to the Board of Appeals.
Sure.
It doesn't matter who's here.
I think you had a good point before that I would caution the selectmen for approving a license where you don't have any use that you know of currently that
Right.
allows this. So that would be my only precaution, and continuing the hearing, of course, we can do that, but I don't know what that would do, having the neighbors come in to speak on it, until you have that zoning use.
Well, you know what, I don't know how long your building inspector's been here, because I know in Dartmouth we have them like every 4 years.
Since 2007, sir.
Okay, so maybe give them the opportunity to get enough proof to show that this was been in existence, pre-existing non-conforming use. It seems like he wrote a letter, I haven't seen it, and you haven't seen it.
So here's the
Oh,
deal.
I've seen them.
Because we've issued license, what I would like, if you can go back and find the licenses from 2019 to 1991, please print every one of those up. Whether there was a variance or not, in my mind, whether there's a variance or not, the fact that we've got 30 years of licenses issued demonstrates the intent of the town.
Correct.
And when this gentleman bought the property, he was going based on what he thought was the rules of the road. He bought it thinking that he had a
I'm
license.
more than happy to turn these over to you. So,
Yeah.
that's one letter, that's a separate letter.
You
That's a
want a
third,
repo?
and, yeah, this one,
One
one of them,
You want one, yeah.
what's that? You know how many copies of things I got? There you go.
Couple on one.
So, this one's the only one with a date,
Okay.
and I don't understand why there's no dates, but those other ones, I can tell you right now, those other two without the date are current to this last license, the holding of those licenses.
Okay.
That's about all I can say.
Well, you know what, maybe they, in the interim, maybe they can put together something to give more proof. Maybe the former stockholder has more information than we know. Obviously, I'm working on whatever information I have in front of me, but, if we can find something different that might change the building inspector's opinion, we'll give it a shot.
Well, the issue still is where it's located, but anyway.
Right, we have to define what the zoning use, I mean,
Right.
just come down to it, just get an answer to it. If it's pre-existing, non-conforming, well, so be it, okay?
That's-
So be it, then hey, you know,
Well, that's what he wrote, and that's what he signed in
Well,
2018.
Well, that's what I mean, maybe he's changed
Yeah,
his
it's,
opinion.
but, you see, when you read the letters, and I'm sure your attorney will capture some mistakes, as I have.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
it
will.
seems like there.
Yeah, you will, you'll catch them.
Seems like there's conflicting.
You'll catch the mistakes in the way the letters are written, as I did, okay? There's no way, how would he ever be able to now say, well, I wrote the letters, but I didn't mean the letters?
I know.
I mean, that's the damaging part,
Yeah,
right? You can't just say that. There's no way in hell.
I know. He's
Where
got.
were these letters when I bought? this
Right, that's
place?
what, Mark,
When
let me
it
ask you
came
this.
to-
So I.
If you knew this,
Where
would you
were
have bought
these-
the property?
No, when I
Right.
asked the town if there was any problems or anything that I should be knowing, and I was told I'm in zoning compliance, which means I'm in zoning compliance. That's what I was told.
So she wants to know by who, because I came in after that day I spoke to you and I said, I'm gonna go find out, and I
I
believe
believe we.
Mr.
sure
Mara
of that before we
responded
bought
and
the
said
property,
no.
Correct?
I would think with
Yeah,
30
I
years
think-
of
I did-
of licenses,
I think that
that's
was-
Yeah.
proof enough to somebody. I don't know, anyway.
So what's the motion? Because we need to
You
get.
guys are blue,
I made a
blue supper
motion.
already, so.
I made a motion to continue
Thank
to,
God you started-
I already
thank God you started at
I already
4.
text my girl and let her know that
is it May 17th? Is that when we're meeting again?
I believe so,
Okay.
yeah.
So I made a motion to,
Continue, you have to make a motion, if you wanna make a motion, Selectman Warren, I would appreciate it if you make a motion to continue the public hearing
until May 17th,
to May 17th, and you need a time on that May 17th night.
4:15.
Okay, good. Thanks, guys.
Is there a second?
Motion dies.
Motion dies for a lack of a second. Is there another motion? Anybody?
Is there a motion to approve the Class 3 permit? To renew the Class 3 permit?
Motion dies for a lack of a second.
Okay, we'll go to door number 3. Is there a motion to deny the renewal of the Class 3 permit?
with modifications, I would agree to deny without prejudice. This way they can go back and get their ducks more in a row and go before the ZBA and get that, because once again, we are not the determining factor on what the zoning of that property. I have a zoning enforcement agent that says they're not allowed, I can't, it kind of boxes me in. How do I determine that it's zoned for that? They claim that they're pre-existing, non-conforming. Well, give us some information on how that all developed, and I'm open into listening. This isn't deny the license, this is deny without prejudice. I just feel that not enough evidence has been presented for
How
me
much
to
more
sit
do
here
you
and
need?
issue a license.
Like, what is it that you're asking?
I'm asking for any clue, any idea when a variance was granted on
There was
the
never a
property.
variance
Or
granted, so
your
you don't have to
Let's
answer
get
it.
over the
non-conforming
variance
status.
Right,
We're going with pre-existing non-conforming use, all right? So how do we go about 100% proving that? I mean, because you're telling me it's all hearsay, blah, 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 but it's been a business, that
I'm not
same
saying it's hearsay, Mike.
business, right?
You know what,
So
Dave, what,
how do I prove that?
hold on,
I'm confused.
if you just continue this till the next meeting and give us time to get the zoning enforcement officer all the information he needs to determine if this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. And at that point in time, if he can confirm that, and he can change his stance, it looks like he's changed his stance multiple times.
When were you
on
brought on,
different things.
Mr. Williams?
Pardon me?
When were you brought on as counsel?
In December.
There's a motion on the floor, you made a motion to deny. He amended the motion to deny without prejudice, I think you said?
Mm-hmm.
I don't second that. I don't second the amendment. Because what Mr. DeRoche is suggesting, one is what I suggested about an hour and a half ago, but is essentially in effect what the motion to extend the public hearing would accomplish.
What's extending the public hearing and having residents come in and determining if that property is zoned for a a class 3 license? I mean, bringing people in and saying, okay.
But David also gives them more time to find the information that that calls into question. But again, an hour and a half ago, I suggested that we deny this and kick it over to the ZBA. And
Well,
we've had an hour and a half of discussion
Right,
on, okay.
so
I think that would be a workable thing. Give them a couple of weeks to see if they can try to prove
I don't know
enough
what to say.
evidence to the zoning enforcement officer, because no one's made an attempt to do that with
Hey,
him,
Jeff.
you know?
The cable network. Okay, so,
You can hear it.
yeah, well, I can't talk to him, so now I'm talking to
you
town
put him on
council, just so
speaker?
everybody's
Put them
aware.
on speaker.
Yeah. Jeff, you're on speaker now, okay?
Yeah, your computer kicked me off. I've been listening the whole time.
Yeah, well, I think Zoom meetings time out after so long, right? So anyways,
No, I guess it was your computer is going through an update right now.
oh, nice.
Horrible timing.
I got 3 laptops, we couldn't get one to work right? But anyways, Jeff, I apologize for that. So we are inside the meeting and there was a motion to just deny by Selectman Wona, and then Mr. DeRoche made a motion to, amended the motion to deny without prejudice.
Yeah.
So a motion to deny without prejudice. What happens in that?
What it essentially means is there's no harm for them bringing it back. I don't believe that there's a repetitive, I know there's no repetitive petition prohibition against them bringing up another motion, another application before you once they figured out the zoning issue. So I think that what Mr. DeRoche is trying to say is without prejudice, meaning you can bring it back once you get your ducks in a row. I think that's an appropriate motion.
Okay,
Mr. Blake?
Mr.
how
Blake,
about
hold on a second. David Wona wants to ask.
a motion to continue the hearing until a date certain.
You would have to make it a time and date, sir. If
Yeah.
you don't, then you just have to renotice it all over again.
No, but if we establish a date certain,
Then you're fine. You do a date certain, and you can keep kicking that can down the road too if you want. If
and
you say
allowing
date
allowing
certain,
them
May
to get more
17th,
information,
and
more
nothing happens,
information.
you could open the hearing and continue it to June 17th, and
Oh.
then to July 17th.
What's, I'm sorry, Jeff, there's been a lot going on here, and it's getting to be, Mr. DeRoche's, motion to deny without prejudice. What happens in that case to the applicant?
He would just have to ask for another renewal.
Would you go to the ZBA?
He could go to the ZBA, yeah, I would be incumbent upon him to go to the ZBA. It doesn't automatically go. He would then go through the necessary steps to get whatever zoning determination as to whether or not that's an allowed use in that district, and or whether or not it's grandfathered, and then he would come to you and show you that, look, after I spoke with the zoning enforcement official, he determined that it was a pre-existing non-conforming use. And, okay, so now it's an allowed use in the district. So then you would make your determination based on that. I think it would take away that suitable place analysis that I had given to you guys earlier in the meeting.
So, Mr. DeRoche's to deny without prejudice, that's not detrimental?
No, it's not detrimental to, I mean, they can always bring it back. I mean, it denies it denies the renewal, but they can always bring it back.
But if we did a motion to continue with a date certain, in that period of time, they could bring back the supporting information as well, right? Without having.
Yes, absolutely, and then you wouldn't have to renotice and go through the whole process all over again, yes.
Can I ask a question, because I'm pretty sure you were listening to me, and I just wanna make it straight for the applicant, for, Mark, I'll call him Mark Jr.
Don't call me Mark Jr.
Mark A. Cinerizio. What's the deal if I'm not reelected, right? And then his father can't vote, and then we have two differences of opinion, which ends in a tie. How does this affect Mark A. Cinerizio?
Well, it's an interesting question, and whether or not, a class 3 license is a mandatory action by this particular board, and I think it probably has a decision on it. Then we would have to do the analysis as to whether or not the so-called rule of necessity applies. And that would be, even though I have a conflict, we have to act as a board, and we can't. Now, I don't know that because you have at least 2 members, you would have a quorum. I don't know that the board's, I don't know that the rule of necessity would apply. So what would happen in that instance is, if you have a difference of opinion and you can't get a vote to approve it, then it would be denied.
So here's the deal. I'll state this for the record.
All right.
I'm not that stubborn where I have to have a deadlock on this. Leave it at that.
Mr.
Well, then I will withdraw. I will make a motion to withdraw my motion to deny with prejudice and make a motion to extend this to a future date to be determined. Please give me a date.
We did.
17th, we said at
That's the next time we're
4:15.
gonna meet, right?
4:15, even though okay, so go ahead, it's on the table. All right?
It's a good motion. I'll second that.
All those in favor? Jeff, thank you.
All right, you guys good?
There's been a motion to continue until May 17th, we said, Dave?
Yeah.
May 17th at 4:15.
Okay.
So the public hearing, that's a motion.
Did you guys vote?
You second that?
I
Motion?
made the motion.
And you
I'll
second
second
it?
it.
All those in
Good idea.
favor?
Aye.
The meeting's been, moved
The
to,
public hearing.
public hearing's been continued to May 17th at 4:15. Jeff, thank you for your time.
All right.
Okay, guys. Thank you, sorry it took so long.
See you in May. Thank you.
You're welcome,
Good
man.
night.
Take care, have a good night. We already did the hearing on the quorum change, department head contracts. We have, first one we have is the animal control officer. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Can I just ask a question? I know it's on the agenda. Isn't this time of year, isn't it kind of early to be doing these things?
Nope.
It's usually in May. We have voted them in May in the past.
Or
We,
late or earlier.
we start discussions typically in March and, work through everything and vote it usually in May.
Okay.
And is there, assistant town accountant, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Assistant treasurer collector, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And Ms. Hebert, I'm taking, your word that you have the correct hourly wage in these.
The town accountant worked through it with Lisa. And I did check it before it was input, but I didn't look through it afterward. I was out.
You just gotta make sure that you check it.
I'll just double check it, yep.
Treasurer collector. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's been reduced to a one-year contract, gentlemen, not 3. Building inspector, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Building inspector we're on?
Yep. And these are all 1 year.
Yes.
Yep.
So move, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Conservation agent,
So moved.
motion dies for a lack of a second. Council on Aging director,
So moved.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Business manager, DPW,
So moved.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Administrative assistant, selectman's office,
So moved.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Golf superintendent,
So moved.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Golf pro, Joe, is this something new?
No.
This looks a little bit strange, the format versus our
Yeah.
other ones. What's the deal with this one?
That's the way his, I don't know, for whatever reason, his was always set up like that. We can change it and put it in the same format.
Okay, well, we've done one for this particular individual.
Mhm.
Yes,
I don't remember ever seeing one for this individual, that's why.
yes.
I don't know when this came about.
He's the golf pro at the course.
Yeah,
Isaac.
I can read that,
Yeah.
but I thought, well, maybe they've got some different creation. So, golf pro, motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Golf manager,
So moved.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Director of Highway, Water and Sewer Superintendent,
So moved.
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Julie?
Yep.
I don't know how this came about, but it talks about certain amount of dollars covering payment for holding a class 2 drinking water license. Has that been in previous?
It has.
It
So,
has?
Yeah, it has.
Okay. But that's all part of his,
It's all part of the
Total.
total, yeah. So it was just evenly separated out with the one.
yeah, because I know that we do certain individuals that we break out,
That one
the
is,
salary as far as Mr. Menard, I think Miss Silver, our business manager, and even our water sewer guys, there's separations and breakouts of how we do their salaries. I think it's weighted 70% water, 30% sewer, when we have, like, say, a worker. And I don't recognize that at all, being in an old contract, but neither here or there. And the next, that's it. So, temporary outdoor seating, I'll keep this simple, temporary outdoor seating, we've done this in the past, gentlemen. We have Cam's Cuisine, Ponderosa, Captain's Place and River's End. It just allows outdoor seating for some additional capacity due to COVID-19. And is there a motion to approve outdoor seating, temporary outdoor seating for those 4 names? Contingent upon approval by the health agent, building commissioner, fire chief, police chief, and town administrator need to sign off. And that has not been done on any of these, but I think like River's End will be simple because I don't think they're gonna have a tent, but the fire inspector needs to go off with tents over a certain size for inspections and things of the like, so
Has Rochelle submitted a, application?
I don't have that. Do you?
I don't have that either.
Then we ain't doing it.
Okay.
It's only for what we have submitted,
can
and
still
Miss Leonard
submit,
had
right?
brought in,
Okay.
Miss Leonard brought in the Ponderosa,
Mhm.
Today. And we're gonna accept that.
Good.
So I said Cam's Cuisine, Ponderosa, Captain's Place, River's End. So there's Mr. Selectman Wona made a motion to approve, and I'll just add pending approval by the health agent, building commissioner, fire chief, and police chief, and town administrator.
Be good, and all this ends on November 1st.
You want,
Although the date is wrong on this, so I'm approving something that the date's wrong.
We'll fix that.
what date's wrong
We'll
on what?
fix it. Okay, we'll fix it. So I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
What do you got for a
On the
date?
application,
Well, it says temporary, this will expire November 1st,
Oh, yeah, it's
2020.
2021, you
Well,
can't
right.
expire last year.
Right.
That's because they used the template, it was a cut, copy, paste.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm okay.
We'll fix the dates to make sure it expires on whatever date that is, 2021, but good catch. Town clerk cares request. I thought we did this already. At this Board of Selectmen's meeting, my request is for $1,000 for the purchase of new plexiglass shields. These shields assist in keeping safe distance between election staff and voters. Since COVID, these plexiglass shields have also been used in the town clerk's office. Unfortunately, some of the shields were broken. So basically, she's got some busted plexiglass shields that she needs to be replaced. She's looking to for CARES funding in the amount of $1,000. Is that correct, Ms. Ebert?
that's correct.
Is there a motion to approve the $1,000 for the town clerk's office from the CARES fund?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And every year we go through the Patriot Half Marathon. Looks like the fire chief and chief of police have signed off on this. Is there a motion to approve the Patriot Half Marathon?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Serped appointment designee. Serped appointment designee. So that used to be Mr. Young, and Mr. Young is no longer around. So, is there any appetite?
That's right, yeah.
I will not.
I'd wait till after the election.
We have to give them an update by May 18th, I believe it is.
Good enough. Our meeting's May
Well,
17th, correct? Oh,
All right, no, I'll take it. If you guys wanna appoint me.
Yeah, go for it.
Motion. Is
You
there a
want-
motion
if
to
I'm
appoint?
vetted? Okay, I'm vetted, all right.
I think it'd be good for you, Selectman DeRoche, to do that through your chairman, yeah? There's not much going on, I don't think, but, at least you can keep the board apprised of any kind of
That's
funding.
correct.
Any funding sources and things of that nature, so, is there a motion? I'll make the motion to appoint Selectman DeRoche as our, Serpent designee.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, I'm
Congratulations.
the Serta guy, so we got a meeting
There you go.
in a couple weeks to talk about bus service.
Oh,
for our
yeah?
Residents of
You know, if you
Acushnet.
find a forklift.
So, we will see.
VFW entertainment license. It looks like the VFW is going to reopen after being closed for quite some time. Proudly announce our first ever cruise night at the Post. May 10th, 2021, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. That would be town meeting night. May 10th, 2021, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Good news. If you go there, you can go to town meeting at 7 p.m. and join us. Come join us and relive the days of the past featuring those classic cars and music by. So I believe they are looking for Town of Acushnet application for an entertainment license. It'd be a one-day entertainment license. Is there a motion to approve a entertainment license? I don't know. Oh, Julie. Sometimes we like to have, none of this is filled out, so this is kind of messed up. I will, it starts at 4 PM, but I think we need to give them some leeway time for the entertainment license. Usually that information's been filled out on this thing here,
Yeah.
so, hours of operation, there you go. Is there a motion, what do you guys wanna do? I would say nothing less than an hour before they're gonna start. What do you think? Entertainment license from
Nothing
3
less than an
PM,
hour, so,
3 PM to 7 PM?
Absolutely.
yeah.
This is usually filled out, Selectman DeRoche.
Right,
And
right.
it's left blank. So we're gonna have to take the liberty, unfortunately, to approve this. I'm fine with going an hour earlier for their entertainment license. They already have a liquor license for the facility, so all this is an entertainment license as specified at the top of the application. And it would be pending
Right, so-
approval by the Board of Health, Police Chief, Fire Chief, and zoning officer. So I'll entertain a motion for the VFW entertainment license, amusement entertainment license from the hours of 3 PM to 7:30 PM. Give them an extra half an hour at the end too.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Hebert, can you notify?
Yeah, I apologize, I wasn't here, so I didn't realize that it wasn't.
Just let them know that the Board of Selectmen gave it to them, an entertainment license from 3 PM to 7:30 to give a little bit of overlap, but we would expect them to,
They should still fill it out, yeah.
to be closed at 7 o'clock in respect to the neighbors.
Right, break down.
All right, but in case they need to break down, it won't cause any disturbance, we don't have to
Yeah.
listen to any blah.
if they have
Annual
encore.
town election warrant, there's a new one. Please add this in advance, thank you very much, blah, 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 blah. Is there a motion to approve the annual town election warrant? And there is selectmen's 1 year, assessors 1 year, Board of Health 1 year, school committee 1 year, one opening, I'm sorry, all
Yeah,
one
one
openings.
Right,
One opening, trust fund, planning commission, one opening. 2 openings on the free trustee of free public library. Park commissioner, 1, housing authority 1, and tree warden. And the only, from what I'm told, the only contested race is the selectman's seat. Is there a motion to approve the annual town election warrant?
so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye?
Passes. Yeah. Department of Public Works, nothing. Town administrators report, you've been on vacation.
Yep, I'm good, I have nothing.
Selectmen's announcements, gentlemen, what you got? For all those people that'll be watching this meeting at home in a few days, town meeting, May 10th, 7 PM, Ford Middle School. And for all you moms out there, happy Mother's Day. It's Sunday coming up, so happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there. Congratulations, and wish you all a very wonderful, safe holiday. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.